Hi guys, medieval physicians advise patients to eat ground emeralds to reduce fever. However, modern toxicology shows that even a few grams of this can cause kidney failure within hours. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in New York listen to history stories to sleep. Okay, tonight we're talking about medieval cures that would kill you today. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Pillows good, blankets situation handled, perfect. Trust me on this one. You're in England in 1350. The Black Death epidemic entered the country 2 years earlier via the port of Weymouth. As a result of the epidemic, nearly 50% of the population died. The walls are dark wood, or maybe stone if you're lucky enough to be in a monastery infirmary, and there's a small window up high that lets in a triangle of pale light. Dust moves through it like it has all the time in the world. You're watching a man in a rough brown robe lean over a patient. And the patient is you, actually, because that's how this works. You're the one lying on the straw mattress with the fever that won't break and the headache that feels like your skull is being squeezed by an invisible hand. You've been this way for 3 days. Your family brought you here because the local healer said you needed professional help. And by professional they meant a monk who once read part of a medical manuscript that was copied from a Greek text that was translated from Arabic. So really nobody's entirely sure what any of it originally said. The monk, his name is Brother Aldwin, or maybe Aelred. It's hard to remember when your head is pounding, is muttering something in Latin. You don't speak Latin. He doesn't really either, not fluently, but he knows the prayer parts and a few phrases from Galen and Hippocrates, and that's enough to make him the most qualified person within 15 miles. He's looking at your tongue, then he's looking at your urine in a small glass vial, holding it up to the light like it's going to tell him your fortune. In a way, it is. Uroscopy, they call it. The colour, the cloudiness, the sediment, even the smell, all of it means something in the grand humoral theory of medicine. Your urine is dark, that's not good. It means an imbalance, too much yellow bile, or maybe black bile. Honestly, the system is complicated and even the experts argue about it, but the treatment is usually the same. You need to be bled. You're too tired to protest. Brother Aldwin is already reaching for a small brass bowl and a lancet, which is just a fancy word for a very sharp little knife. He's explaining in slow, careful English now that your body has too much corrupt blood pooled near your brain, and that's what's causing the pressure and the pain. If he lets some of it out, you'll feel better. The logic, in a world without microscopes or germ theory, almost makes sense. Something bad is in you. Remove some of you. Remove some of the bad. It's intuitive. It's also going to make you weaker, dizzier, and more likely to die from the very infection you're already fighting. But nobody knows that yet. Not for another 500 years. He wraps a leather strap around your upper arm and tells you to make a fist. You do. The vein rises, pale blue under your pale skin. The room smells like tallow candles and damp earth. The lancet is cold when it touches your skin, and then there's a sting, sharp and quick, and you feel the blood start to run warm down your arm into the bowl. Brother Aldwin watches it with the focus of someone checking bread in an oven. Not too much, not too little, just enough to restore balance. You're already lightheaded and you haven't even lost that much blood yet, maybe half a cup, but you've been sick for days and you haven't eaten much except thin broth and a piece of hard bread yesterday morning. The monk hums something under his breath, maybe a hymn, maybe just a tune he likes. He's done this 100 times. Bleeding is as routine as changing rushes on the floor or ringing the bells for prayer. Everyone gets bled eventually. It's spring, so there's the seasonal bleeding to prevent imbalances. If you're rich, you get bled on a schedule aligned with the stars and the phases of the moon. If you're not, you get bled when something goes wrong, which is what's happening now. The blood in the bowl looks darker than you expected. Brother Aldwin nods approvingly. Dark blood means bad blood, or at least that's the assumption. You're supposed to feel relief, but mostly you just feel cold. He ties a strip of linen around your arm to stop the bleeding and tells you to rest. He'll check on you later, maybe give you a tonic. Possibly involve a poultice made of herbs you've never heard of mixed with animal fat and bread mould. Medieval medicine is nothing if not creative. You close your eyes and listen to his footsteps fade into the stone hallway outside. The soft shuffle of rope sandals on cold floor. Somewhere further away monks are chanting. The sound is low and steady, and it echoes in a way that makes the whole building feel like it's breathing. Pingu. You drift in and out of sleep, or maybe it's unconsciousness, hard to say. The fever dreams are vivid and strange. You're walking through a forest, but the trees are made of glass and they chime when the wind blows. You're looking for something, you don't know what. Then you're awake again and it's darker in the room, which means time has passed, maybe hours, maybe just one. There's a woman sitting near the window. She's wearing a grey dress and a white linen coif, and she's grinding something in a mortar with a pestle. The scraping sounds steady and rhythmic. You don't know her name either. Maybe she's a nun. Maybe she's a local healer who works with the monks sometimes. She doesn't look at you, but she knows you're awake. She keeps grinding. The smell that starts to fill the room is bitter and green, like crushed leaves and something sharper underneath. Wormwood, maybe, or rue, both were common. Both were thought to drive out bad humours and evil spirits, which in medieval medicine were sometimes considered the same thing. When she's done grinding, she adds a little wine to the powder, mixes it into a paste and brings it over to you in a wooden cup. She gestures for you to drink. You hesitate, because it smells like it's going to taste worse than it smells, and you're right. It's bitter enough to make your mouth ache, and there's a metallic aftertaste that lingers on your tongue like you've been licking coins. She watches you finish it with the patience of someone who's seen 1,000 sick people refuse medicine and then die anyway. You're not going to refuse. You're too tired, maybe too scared. She takes the cup back and returns to her spot by the window. Outside, the light is fading into evening blue. You can hear birds settling down in the eaves. Your arm throbs where you were bled. The fever hasn't broken. You're thirsty, but no one offers you water. Liquids were sometimes restricted during fevers based on the idea that they could make humours worse, make things flow too freely in the body. You're just supposed to lie there and let the treatment work, or not work. Survival was always a bit of a gamble. You wake up again, and this time the room is fully dark except for a single candle burning on a wooden shelf near the door. The flame doesn't flicker much, which means the air is still, thick with night and silence. Your fever is still there, sitting behind your eyes like a hot stone, but something has shifted. You're more aware now, more present in your body even though your body feels like it's made of wet cloth. You can hear your own breathing, shallow and quick, and somewhere in the building someone is coughing, a deep rattling sound that goes on until it finally stops. You wonder if they're getting bled too. You wonder if it's helping them any more than it's helping you. Probably not, but that's the thing about medieval medicine. Nobody's tracking outcomes, nobody's writing down success rates or comparing treatments in controlled studies. If you get better, the treatment worked. If you die, well, it was God's will, or the planets were misaligned, or you had a sinful thought that corrupted your humours. There's always an explanation that doesn't involve the treatment itself being useless or actively harmful. The woman in grey is gone now. In her place, or maybe just making his rounds, Brother Aldwin has returned. He's carrying a leather satchel and he sets it down on a small table with a soft thud. You watch him through half-closed eyes as he pulls out various items. A bundle of dried herbs tied with string, a small ceramic jar sealed with wax, a piece of parchment covered in cramped handwriting. He's consulting the parchment, moving his lips as he reads, and you realize he's following a recipe. Medieval medical texts were full of them, recipes for every ailment imaginable, written by physicians who'd been dead for centuries and whose ideas had been copied and miscopied so many times that the instructions sometimes contradicted themselves. But Brother Aldwin doesn't seem bothered by contradictions. He's a practical man. He takes what makes sense to him and improvises the rest. He lights a second candle and uses it to heat a small copper pot over the flame. Into the pot he crumbles some of the dried herbs. You catch the scent of rosemary, which you recognize because your mother grew it in the garden behind your house, and something else that's more medicinal, sharper. Maybe horehound, maybe hyssop. Plants with strong smells were believed to have strong effects, the idea being that illness could be driven out by overwhelming it with powerful scents and tastes. He adds a spoonful of honey from the ceramic jar, and then, to your surprise, he opens a tiny vial and adds what looks like powdered gemstone. You're not imagining it. Ground pearls, or maybe coral, were legitimate ingredients in medieval pharmacology. They were thought to strengthen the heart and purify the blood, based mostly on the fact that they were beautiful and rare, and beauty and rarity implied virtue. The mixture in the pot starts to bubble and thicken, turning into a syrup that gleams in the candlelight like liquid amber. Brother Aldwin lets it cool for a moment, then pours a small amount into a wooden spoon and brings it to your lips. You open your mouth because what else are you going to do? And the syrup slides onto your tongue, warm and sticky sweet with an herbal bitterness underneath. It's not as bad as the wormwood paste from earlier, but it coats your throat in a way that makes you want to cough. You don't, because coughing hurts, and also because Brother Aldwin is nodding approvingly like you've just done something very wise. He tells you this will fortify your vital spirits and help your body fight the corruption that's taken hold. You nod because nodding seems easier than asking questions like what are vital spirits, or how does ground pearl help a fever? Or is any of this based on anything real? In fairness to Brother Aldwin, he's doing his best with the knowledge available to him. He genuinely believes he's helping. He's spent years studying, or at least reading medical texts. He's treated dozens of patients, some of them even survived, which in his mind confirms that the treatments work. Survivorship bias won't be formally identified for many centuries, but it's operating at full strength right here in this dim infirmary room. After you swallow the syrup, Brother Aldwin places his hand on your forehead. His palm is cool and dry, rough with calluses from work in the monastery garden. He's checking your temperature, but he's also praying, whispering words you can't quite make out. Medicine and religion are so intertwined in this period that they're basically the same thing. Healing comes from God, but God works through herbs and bloodletting and the knowledge passed down from ancient physicians who were also philosophers and astrologers. It's all one system, and you're caught inside it, lying on scratchy straw, hoping that somewhere in the mixture of prayer and syrup and letting out your blood, there's something that will actually make the fever go away. Morning comes slowly, the way it always does when you've been been awake most of the night. The triangle of light from the high window turns from black to deep blue to grey, and then finally to a weak yellow that doesn't quite reach where you're lying. You can hear the monastery waking up around you. Footsteps in the corridor, the distant clang of a bell calling the monks to lauds. Somewhere someone is sweeping, the bristles scraping against stone in long rhythmic strokes. Your fever broke sometime before dawn. You're not sure exactly when, just that at some point you stopped feeling like you were burning from the inside and started feeling cold instead, shivering under the thin woolen blanket they've given you. Your arm, where Brother Aldwin bled you, is sore and stiff. When you carefully move the linen bandage aside to look, the cut is red around the edges. Not angry red, just irritated, but it's enough to make you wonder if it's going to get infected. Infection is a concept you understand in a practical sense, even if nobody around you understands it in a medical sense. You know that wounds can go bad. You've seen it happen to a neighbor once, a man who cut his hand while splitting wood, and 3 days later his whole arm was swollen and hot and he died less than a week after that. Nobody called it bacterial infection, they called it bad air, or corrupt humours, or maybe a curse if the family had recently argued with anyone. Brother Aldwin appears in the doorway, and he looks pleased when he sees you're awake and alert. He comes over and feels your forehead again, nods, makes a satisfied sound low in his throat. The treatment worked. In his assessment, you were bled, you were given fortifying syrup, you were prayed over, and now your fever is gone. The fact that fevers often break on their own after a few days regardless of intervention is not something that occurs to him, because without the framework of controlled trials and placebo effects, there's no way to distinguish between correlation and causation. Everything that happened before you got better must have contributed to you getting better. That's just logic. So he's proud of himself. And honestly, you're too exhausted to argue. You're alive. That's what matters. Whether you're alive because of the treatment or in spite of it is a question for a different century. He brings you water finally, in a clay cup, and you drink it so fast you almost choke. It tastes like stone and minerals, and it's the best thing you've ever experienced. He tells you to drink slowly, which you ignore, and he also tells you that you'll need to stay another day or two for observation. This is actually sensible advice, relatively speaking. Rest was one of the few medieval treatments that genuinely helped, mostly because it meant not doing all the other treatments. He leaves you with a piece of bread, harder than you'd like but you eat it anyway, tearing small bits off with your teeth and letting them soften in your mouth before swallowing. Your stomach, which has been mostly empty for days, cramps a little at the sudden introduction of food, but you keep eating because hunger is louder than discomfort. The woman in grey returns around mid-morning. She doesn't speak to you, still, but she changes the rushes on the floor near your bed, sweeping out the old ones that have gotten damp and stale, replacing them with fresh ones that smell like dried grass in summer even though it's only spring. She also brings a basin of water and a cloth, sets them on the floor next to you, and gestures in a way that suggests you should wash yourself if you're able. You are, barely. You dip the cloth in the water, which is cold, and wipe your face, your neck, your hands. The water in the basin turns greyish. You hadn't realised how much sweat and grime had accumulated on your skin over the past few days. Fever sweat has a particular smell, sour and sickly, and it's a relief to wash it away even if you're just replacing it with the general unwashed smell of medieval life. Bathing wasn't common, not full immersion bathing anyway, partly because it was labour-intensive to heat that much water, and partly because medical theory suggested that bathing too often could open your pores and let bad air in, so most people settled for occasional washing of extremities and face, and just lived with the rest. You lie back down after washing, and the exhaustion hits you again like a wave. Your body is trying to recover from the fever, from the blood loss, from days of not eating or sleeping properly, and it needs time. The woman in grey pulls the blanket up over you without saying anything, and you close your eyes. The monastery sounds continue around you, chanting, footsteps, the scrape of benches being moved in the chapel, a dog barking somewhere outside. Life goes on, indifferent to whether you're sick or well, and there's something almost comforting about that. By the second day in the infirmary, you're strong enough to sit up for more than a few minutes at a time, and Brother Aldwin seems pleased enough with your progress that he decides it's time for a different kind of treatment. The bloodletting helped. He tells you it removed the excess corrupted humours, but now your body needs strengthening from within. He's carrying a small wooden box, the kind with a fitted lid that slides into grooves, and when he opens it you see a collection of things that look more like jewellery than medicine. Small pieces of polished stone in different colours, deep red garnets, pale moonstones, a chunk of amber with something dark trapped inside it, and there, wrapped carefully in a piece of linen, several fragments of emerald, green and crystalline and catching the morning light from the window in a way that makes them look almost liquid. You stare at the emeralds because they're the most beautiful things you've seen in days, maybe weeks, and Brother Aldwin notices your attention. He picks up one of the fragments, holds it up so you can see it better, and explains that emeralds are particularly powerful for treating fever and restoring vitality to the organs. The green colour, he says, corresponds to the element of Earth and the planet Venus, and Venus governs health and harmony in the body. Emeralds have cooling properties, he continues, which makes them perfect for countering the heat of fever. They strengthen the heart, purify the blood, and if taken regularly they can even improve eyesight and memory. He's reciting this from texts he's read, from authorities who wrote about the medical properties of gemstones centuries ago, men who believed that the physical properties of stones, their color and weight and hardness, reflected deeper spiritual and medical virtues. What he doesn't tell you, because he doesn't know, is that emeralds are beryllium aluminum silicate crystals, and that beryllium is toxic to human kidneys. He doesn't know that grinding emerald into powder and consuming it will introduce beryllium particles into your digestive system, where they'll be absorbed into your bloodstream and filtered through your kidneys, causing cellular damage that accumulates with each dose. He doesn't know that even a few grams of powdered emerald can cause acute kidney injury, that your kidneys will start to fail within hours, that you'll develop symptoms that look like they might be part of your original illness getting worse, nausea and confusion and pain in your lower back, and that by the time anyone realizes something is wrong it will be too late to do anything about it. Medieval physicians had no concept of heavy metal toxicity or organ failure caused by the very treatments they were administering. They just knew that emeralds were precious and beautiful, and therefore must be good for you. Brother Aldwin takes the emerald fragment to a small stone mortar on the table and begins grinding it with a pestle. The sound is gritty and sharp, crystal breaking down into powder. It takes him several minutes of steady work, his shoulder moving in a circular rhythm, before the emerald is reduced to a fine green dust that collects in the bottom of the mortar. He's careful about it, grinding thoroughly, because he wants the powder to be as fine as possible so it will mix well with liquid and be easier to swallow. He doesn't want you choking on chunks of gemstone. That would be dangerous, he thinks, not realizing that the powder is far more dangerous than any choking hazard. Once it's ground fine enough to satisfy him, he adds a spoonful of honey and a little wine, mixes it into a paste, and then dilutes it with more wine until it becomes a green-tinted liquid that swirls in the cup like something magical. He brings the cup to you with the same confidence he had when he bled you, when he gave you the herbal syrups, when he did everything else that was supposed to help. This is medicine, expensive medicine, the kind usually reserved for wealthy patients who can afford to consume gemstones, but the monastery has a small supply donated by a noble family years ago, and Brother Aldwin believes your case warrants it. You're young, you're responding well to treatment, and he wants to make sure your recovery is complete, so he's giving you ground emerald in wine, and he's telling you to drink it slowly, to let it settle in your stomach, to feel it working through your body like cool water on a hot day. You take the cup because what else are you going to do? It's heavier than you expected, and when you look down into it you can see tiny particles of green suspended in the dark wine, glittering slightly, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. The first sip tastes like wine with a gritty mineral undertone, and you feel the particles on your tongue, too fine to be unpleasant but present enough that you're aware you're drinking something that used to be a stone. Brother Aldwin watches you with the attentiveness of someone monitoring a patient's response to treatment, and you swallow, feel the liquid go down, feel it hit your stomach which is still tender from days of fever and minimal food. By the second day in the infirmary you're strong enough to sit up for more than a few minutes at a time, and Brother Aldwin seems pleased enough with your progress that he decides it's time for a different kind of treatment. The bloodletting helped. He tells you it removed the excess corrupted humours, but now your body needs strengthening from within. He's carrying a small wooden box, the kind with a fitted lid that slides into grooves, and when he opens it you see a collection of things that look more like jewellery than medicine. Small pieces of polished stone in different colours, deep red garnets, pale moonstones, a chunk of amber with something dark trapped inside it, and there, wrapped carefully in a piece of linen, several fragments of emerald, green and crystalline and catching the morning light from the window in a way that makes them look almost liquid. You stare at the emeralds because they're the most beautiful things you've seen in days, maybe weeks, and Brother Aldwin notices your attention. He picks up one of the fragments, holds it up so you can see it better, and explains that emeralds are particularly powerful for treating fever and restoring vitality to the organs. The green color, he says, corresponds to the element of Earth and the planet Venus, and Venus governs health and harmony in the body. Emeralds have cooling properties, he continues, which makes them perfect for countering the heat of fever. They strengthen the heart, purify the blood, and if taken regularly they can even improve eyesight and memory. He's reciting this from texts he's read, from authorities who wrote about the medical properties of gemstones centuries ago, men who believed that the physical properties of stones, their color and weight and hardness, reflected deeper spiritual and medical virtues. What he doesn't tell you, because he doesn't know, is that emeralds are beryllium aluminum silicate crystals, and that beryllium is toxic to human kidneys. He doesn't know that grinding emerald into powder and consuming it will introduce beryllium particles into your digestive system, where they'll be absorbed into your bloodstream and filtered through your kidneys, causing cellular damage that accumulates with each dose. He doesn't know that even a few grams of powdered emerald can cause acute kidney injury, that your kidneys will start to fail within hours, that you'll develop symptoms that look like they might be part of your original illness getting worse, nausea and confusion and pain in your lower back, and that by the time anyone realizes something is wrong it will be too late to do anything about it. Medieval physicians had no concept of heavy metal toxicity or organ failure caused by the very treatments they were administering. They just knew that emeralds were precious and beautiful, and therefore must be good for you. Brother Aldwin takes the emerald fragment to a small stone mortar on the table and begins grinding it with a pestle. The sound is gritty and sharp, crystal breaking down into powder. It takes him several minutes of steady work, his shoulder moving in a circular rhythm, before the emerald is reduced to a fine green dust that collects in the bottom of the mortar. He's careful about it, grinding thoroughly, because he wants the powder to be as fine as possible so it will mix well with liquid and be easier to swallow. He doesn't want you choking on chunks of gemstone. That would be dangerous, he thinks, not realizing that the powder is far more dangerous than any choking hazard. Once it's ground fine enough to satisfy him, he adds a spoonful of honey and a little wine, mixes it into a paste, and then dilutes it with more wine until it becomes a green-tinted liquid that swirls in the cup like something magical. He brings the cup to you with the same confidence he had when he bled you, when he gave you the herbal syrups, when he did everything else that was supposed to help. This is medicine, expensive medicine, the kind usually reserved for wealthy patients who can afford to consume gemstones, but the monastery has a small supply donated by a noble family years ago, and Brother Aldwin believes your case warrants it. You're young, you're responding well to treatment, and he wants to make sure your recovery is complete. So he's giving you ground emerald in wine, and he's telling you to drink it slowly, to let it settle in your stomach, to feel it working through your body like cool water on a hot day. You take the cup because what else are you going to do? It's heavier than you expected, and when you look down into it you can see tiny particles of green suspended in the dark wine, glittering slightly, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. The first sip tastes like wine with a gritty mineral undertone, and you feel the particles on your tongue, too fine to be unpleasant but present enough that you're aware you're drinking something that used to be a stone. Brother Aldwin watches you with the attentiveness of someone monitoring a patient's response to treatment, and you swallow, feel the liquid go down, feel it hit your stomach which is still tender from days of fever and minimal food. You finish the cup over the course of several minutes, taking small sips the way Brother Aldwin instructed, and when it's empty he takes it from you and nods approvingly. You'll have another dose tomorrow, he tells you, and possibly the day after that depending on how you respond. 3 doses should be enough to fully restore your strength and ensure the fever doesn't return. He's pleased with himself for having access to such refined medicine, for being able to offer you something beyond the standard herbs and bloodletting. Emerald therapy is prestigious, the kind of treatment that gets mentioned in medical texts with a tone of reverence, and he's genuinely convinced he's giving you the best possible care. What happens next takes place over hours, slowly enough that at first you don't realize anything is wrong. Your stomach feels slightly unsettled, but you've barely eaten for days, so that seems normal. You're tired, but you've been tired since the fever started, so that seems normal too. You drift in and out of sleep, and the dreams are strange but not alarming, just the usual fever dream residue, images that don't quite make sense, conversations with people who aren't there. When you wake up in the late afternoon, your mouth is dry, and there's a dull ache starting in your lower back, deep and persistent, the kind of ache that feels like it's coming from inside your bones. You shift position on the mattress, trying to ease it, but the ache doesn't move. It just sits there, steady and growing slowly more uncomfortable. The woman in grey brings you water and you drink it gratefully, but your stomach rebels almost immediately, and you have to fight not to vomit. She notices, her eyes narrowing slightly, and she feels your forehead with the back of her hand. You're not feverish, not externally, but something is clearly wrong. She leaves and returns with Brother Aldwin, who examines you with growing concern. He checks your pulse, looks at your tongue, asks you questions about what you're feeling, the back pain, the nausea, the increasing sense that your body is malfunctioning in some fundamental way. He's puzzled because these aren't the symptoms of recurring fever. If anything, they're symptoms of an entirely different problem, but he doesn't have the framework to understand what that problem might be. He decides it's probably a digestive imbalance. Maybe the emerald was too cooling and has upset your stomach's natural warmth. He prepares a ginger tonic to counteract it, something warming to restore balance, and you drink it because you're desperate for relief even though some part of you suspects that more medicine is not what you need right now. The night is difficult, the back pain intensifies into something sharper, more urgent, and you can feel your kidneys failing even though you don't have the medical vocabulary to identify what's happening. Your urine, when you finally manage to produce some into the pot they've given you, is dark and scanty, and there's blood in it. Not a lot, just enough to tinge it pink, but it's there. The woman in grey sees it when she empties the pot, and her face goes carefully neutral in the way that means she's seen this before and knows what it signifies. She shows it to Brother Aldwin, and he examines it in the candlelight, holding the pot up, swirling it slightly. Blood in the urine after treatment is not unheard of, but it's not a good sign. It suggests internal damage, corruption that's moved deeper into the body. He doesn't connect it to the emerald because why would he? Emeralds are healing stones. They can't cause harm. That's not how his medical system works. What neither of them knows is that your kidneys are currently trying to filter beryllium particles from your blood and failing. The cells in your kidney tubules are dying, and as they die they're sloughing off into your urine along with red blood cells that are leaking through damaged vessel walls. Your kidney function is dropping rapidly. Within another day, you'll be producing almost no urine at all, which means waste products are building up in your bloodstream, poisoning you from within. Uremia, it's called in modern medicine, and it's fatal if untreated. Medieval physicians would just see a patient getting mysteriously worse despite treatment, and they'd try more treatments, more bloodletting, more herbs, possibly more ground gemstones, and they'd never realize they were the ones killing you. Brother Aldwin decides to bleed you again, thinking that perhaps there's still corrupt blood blood that needs to be released, and you're too weak now to protest. You feel the lancet open your vein, feel the blood run out, feel yourself getting weaker and dizzier as your body loses what little resources it has left. The man with the cough in the next partition is silent now, has been for hours. You don't know if he died or recovered. The woman who had childbed fever, you heard her being carried out earlier, wrapped in cloth, and you know what that means. The infirmary is a place where people come to be treated, and sometimes that treatment saves them, and sometimes it kills them, and there's no reliable way to predict which outcome you'll get. You're lying in the dark, bleeding into a brass bowl, your kidneys shutting down from emerald poisoning, and everyone around you thinks they're helping. That's the real horror of it. By the morning of the fourth day, you're barely conscious, drifting in a grey space between sleep and waking where everything feels distant and muffled. Your body has stopped processing waste the way it's supposed to, and the buildup of toxins in your blood is affecting your brain, making your thoughts slow and confused. You can't remember why you're here. Sometimes you think you're at home in your own bed, and you call out for your mother, but she doesn't come because she's not here. She's miles away in your village, probably worried sick because you haven't sent word in days. Sometimes you think you're a child again, lying in the loft above the animals, listening to the sheep move in their pen below. The confusion is a mercy in a way, because it means you're not fully aware of how much your body is failing, how your kidneys have almost completely stopped working, how your blood is becoming a toxic soup of waste products that should have been filtered out. Brother Aldwin is worried now, genuinely worried, because patients who improve and then suddenly decline often don't recover. He's seen it before, this pattern of apparent healing followed by rapid deterioration, and it usually means something has gone fundamentally wrong inside the body, something beyond the reach of medicine. He consults his texts, the precious manuscripts kept in the monastery library, looking for guidance. The symptoms you're showing, the confusion, the bloody urine that's now barely a trickle, the pain in your lower back, none of it quite matches the descriptions he finds. The closest thing is a condition the ancients called nephritis, inflammation of the kidneys, but the recommended treatments are vague and contradictory. Some texts suggest cooling remedies, others suggest warming ones. Some recommend bloodletting, which he's already done. Some suggest poultices applied to the lower back, which seems harmless enough, so he tries it, mixing a paste of mustard seed and vinegar and spreading it on a cloth that he places against your skin. The mustard poultice burns, a sharp superficial heat that adds to your general misery but does nothing for the deep internal problem. Your kidneys are dying, the cells breaking down, the delicate filtering structures that clean your blood collapsing under the toxic assault of beryllium. In a modern hospital, they'd have you on dialysis immediately, a machine doing the work your kidneys can no longer do, filtering your blood externally while your body tried to recover. They'd stop the emerald immediately, obviously, and they'd give you IV fluids and medications to support your remaining kidney function and protect against further damage. You'd have a chance, not a great one because beryllium toxicity is serious, but a chance. Here in this medieval infirmary, you have none of those things. You have mustard paste on your back and prayers, and the well-meaning attention of a monk who has no idea he poisoned you with the very treatment that was supposed to help. The woman in grey sits with you for a while in the late morning, wiping your forehead with a damp cloth even though you don't have a fever. She's seen enough dying patients to recognize the signs, the particular quality of breathing that comes when someone's body is shutting down. She's probably wondering what you did to anger God, what sin you committed that led to this, because in her understanding that's how illness works. Good people get better, people with unconfessed sins get worse. It's simple and brutal and completely wrong, but it's the framework she has for making sense of suffering. She doesn't know that you're dying because someone ground up a green rock and made you drink it, that this has nothing to do with divine judgment and everything to do with toxic elements that won't be understood for another 600 years. You try to speak, but the words come out garbled, nonsensical. Your brain is being affected by the uremic toxins now, the waste products that should have been eliminated building up to levels that interfere with neural function. You're having what modern medicine would call uremic encephalopathy, and it's making you confused and agitated, and eventually, if it continues, it will make you seize and then slip into a coma. The woman in grey speaks softly to you in response to your mumbling, words you can't quite process, but the tone is soothing, maternal. She's done what she can, now it's just a matter of waiting to see whether you'll pull through or not. In her experience, patients in your condition usually don't, but miracles happen sometimes. She's seen them, people who should have died who didn't, who rallied at the last moment for reasons no one could explain. She's hoping you'll be one of those, even though she knows better than to hope too much. Brother Aldwin returns in the afternoon with another preparation, this one made from willow bark and chamomile, something gentle and pain-relieving. He helps you drink it, or tries to, but you can barely swallow now. Most of it runs down your chin and soaks into the fabric of your shirt. He looks at the woman in grey, and something passes between them, an understanding. They've both seen this before, they both know what comes next, but they're not ready to give up yet. Time becomes unreliable after the second dose of emerald. You're awake and then you're not, and the transitions between the two states blur together until you can't always tell which is which. Sometimes you open your eyes and it's day, pale light from the window, and sometimes it's night, just candles and shadows, and you have no sense of how much time has passed between. Brother Aldwin's face appears above you at intervals, his expression increasingly worried, and he's asking you questions that you can't quite process. The woman in grey is there more often now, sitting beside your bed during the hours when she should probably be sleeping, and once you wake up to find her holding your hand, her rough fingers wrapped around yours, and there's something almost maternal about it even though she still has hasn't spoken a single word to you. Your body is shutting down in stages. First the kidneys, which are already mostly gone, producing maybe a few drops of dark bloody urine every few hours and nothing more. Then your digestive system starts to fail, rejecting everything they try to give you, water and broth and wine all coming back up within minutes. Your heart is struggling with the potassium imbalance in your blood, beating irregularly, sometimes too fast, and sometimes with strange pauses that make you feel like you're falling. Your brain is the last to go, and that's almost a mercy because as the uremic toxins build up, you start to drift away from consciousness more and more, spending longer periods in a state that's not quite sleep and not quite waking, just a grey space where the pain is distant and the fear is muted. Brother Aldwin tries everything he can think of. He bleeds you again, though there's barely any blood pressure left to make it flow, and what comes out is thin and slow. He gives you theriac, a legendary compound medicine made from dozens of ingredients including viper flesh and opium, expensive and rare, and believed to be effective against all poisons and diseases. It doesn't help because the poison is already deep in your system, already woven into your tissues, and no amount of viper flesh is going to reverse beryllium toxicity. He anoints you with holy oil and prays the prayers for the sick, calling on St. Luke the physician and St. Roch, who protects against plague, and St. Agatha for some reason you don't quite catch. The prayers are beautiful in Latin, rhythmic and sonorous, and they would be comforting if you were capable of feeling comfort, but mostly you just hear them as sounds, syllables that rise and fall like water. On what might be the 5th day, or possibly the 6th, you stop being able to open your eyes. You can still hear things, voices and footsteps and the ever-present monastery bells, but they seem far away now, like you're hearing them through water or thick wool. You're aware that you're dying, not in a panicked way but as a simple fact, the way you might be aware that it's raining outside or that the sun has set. Your body has had enough. It fought the fever, survived the bloodletting, tried to process the emerald poison, and now it's done. There's no more fight left in it. You're just waiting now, and the waiting isn't as terrible as you thought it would be. Mostly you feel tired, so tired that even breathing seems like too much effort, and your breaths get shallower and further apart, and nobody in the room can do anything about it because they still don't understand what killed you. Brother Aldwin will believe, for the rest of his life, that you died because your humours were too corrupted to be saved, that the fever had already done too much damage before you came to the infirmary. He'll remember you as one of the patients he couldn't help, and it will trouble him, but not enough to make him question whether the emerald treatment was a mistake. Next time someone comes in with a similar fever, he'll use emerald again, maybe a stronger dose, and that patient might die too, and he still won't make the connection. The woman in grey will remember you differently. She sees more patients than Brother Aldwin does, sees them more intimately, helps them with the bodily functions that monks prefer not to deal with, and she's noticed over the years that patients who receive certain treatments seem to get worse instead of better. She doesn't have the education to challenge the medical establishment, doesn't have the language to explain what she's observed, but she knows something is wrong with the way medicine is practiced. She just doesn't know what to do about that knowledge. Your last conscious thought before you slip away entirely is surprisingly mundane. You're thinking about your mother's garden, the one behind your house, and how the rosemary always smelled strongest right after rain. But you don't die, not yet, because sometimes the body has a stubbornness that even medieval medicine can't quite extinguish. You hover in that space between living and dying for another full day, maybe longer, your breathing so shallow that twice Brother Aldwin thinks you've passed, and leans close to check for breath against his hand. Each time he finds a whisper of air, warm and faint, and each time he sits back with an expression that's equal parts relief and confusion. Your kidneys have stopped functioning entirely now, no urine at all for the past day, and the toxins in your bloodstream have reached levels that should have killed you already, would have killed most people, but your heart keeps beating its irregular rhythm and your lungs keep pulling in air, and some spark of whatever makes you alive refuses to go out. The woman in grey stays with you almost constantly now, leaving only for brief periods to attend to other patients, or to fulfill whatever other duties she has in the monastery. When she's gone, Brother Aldwin sits with you instead, or sometimes another monk, a younger one whose name you never learned, and they pray in shifts like they're keeping vigil over something precious. The monastery itself continues around you, indifferent to your crisis. Bells ring for matins and lauds, and prime and tertii and sext and none and vespers and compline, marking out the hours in sound, dividing the day into segments of prayer and work. Monks walk the corridors with their quiet shuffling steps. Somewhere in the kitchen bread is being baked, and the smell of it drifts through the infirmary, yeasty and warm, though it might as well be the smell of something from another world for all the good it does you. The boy with the broken arm is recovering nicely, his splint holding well, and he's able to eat and talk and even laugh sometimes at something one of the monks says to him. His presence is almost obscene in its normalcy, the ordinariness of a bone that will heal, of a body that will recover and go back to running and playing and all the things boys do. You're dying from emerald poisoning 3 partitions away from him, and he has no idea, and there's something almost peaceful about that separation between his world and yours. On the 6th day, or perhaps the 7th, your body makes a decision that surprises everyone including itself. Instead of continuing its slide toward death, it stabilizes. Your breathing doesn't get better exactly, but it stops getting worse. Your heart finds a rhythm that's still irregular but less frantically so. The toxins in your blood are still there, still poisoning you, but your body has apparently adjusted to them somehow, found a way to function at a minimal level despite conditions that should be fatal. It's not recovery, not even close, but it's not dying either, at least not actively, not right this moment. You exist in a strange suspended state, neither alive in any meaningful way nor dead, just persisting. Brother Aldwin calls it a miracle, evidence that his prayers have been answered, that God has chosen to spare you for reasons only he understands. He's overjoyed in a cautious way, afraid to celebrate too much in case you relapse, but you can hear the relief in his voice when he tells the other monks that you're going to survive. He's wrong about that probably. Your kidneys are destroyed. Without dialysis or a transplant, both technologies that won't exist for centuries, there's no way to clear the toxins from your blood long term, but in the short term, right now, you're not dying, and in medieval medicine that counts as success. Brother Aldwin decides to give you another dose of emerald, reasoning that since you've stabilized, the medicine must be working and should be continued. This is the logic of someone who doesn't understand causation, who sees two things happening in sequence and assumes the first caused the second. You stabilized after receiving emerald, therefore emerald caused you to stabilize, therefore more emerald will help you stabilize further. It's the same reasoning that's killed countless patients throughout history, the inability to distinguish between correlation and causation, between something happening after a treatment and something happening because of a treatment. But this time, when he brings the cup of wine with its glittering green particles suspended in the liquid, something different happens. The woman in grey, who has been silent this entire time, who has watched patient after patient receive treatments that seem to make them worse, who has held your hand through the worst of it, and knows in some wordless way that the emerald is what's killing you, does something unprecedented. She reaches out and puts her hand on Brother Aldwin's arm, stopping him. She doesn't speak, still maintaining whatever vow or habit keeps her silent, but she shakes her head once, firmly, and her expression is so clear in its meaning that even Brother Aldwin pauses. No more emerald, no more of whatever this treatment is. She doesn't have the medical knowledge to explain why, doesn't have the authority to contradict him, but she has conviction, and sometimes conviction is enough to make someone hesitate. Brother Aldwin looks at her, then at you, then at the cup in his hand. He's confused and a little offended that someone without medical training would presume to interfere with treatment. The moment stretches out, Brother Aldwin holding the cup, the woman in grey's hand still on his arm, and you're barely conscious of any of it, but some part of you understands that your life is hanging on whatever decision gets made in the next few seconds. Brother Aldwin's training tells him to proceed, to trust the ancient authorities who wrote about the healing properties of gemstones, to follow the treatment plan he's already committed to. But something in the woman's eyes makes him pause. She's seen more death than he has, been present for more of the actual dying, the intimate bodily failure that happens when treatments don't work. Monks study medicine from books. Women like her learn it from watching people suffer and observing what helps and what doesn't. Her knowledge is unwritten, unauthorized, completely outside the official medical system, but it's based on direct observation rather than ancient theory. And right now, in this moment, her certainty is stronger than his. He sets the cup down on the table slowly, and the woman in grey releases his arm. Neither of them speaks. There's no discussion about why the treatment should be stopped. No medical debate about humoral theory or planetary influences. She just knew, and he just trusted her knowing, and that's the end of it. The cup sits on the table for the rest of the day, the wine gradually evaporating, the emerald particles settling to the bottom in a small green layer that catches the light. No one drinks it. No one throws it away either. It just sits there like evidence of a decision that saved your life, though you won't know that's what happened until much later, if you ever know at all. Without additional doses of emerald, your body begins the long, slow process of trying to recover from the damage that's already been done. Your kidneys are permanently injured, probably functioning at maybe 20 or 30% of their original capacity, but 20% turns out to be enough to keep you alive if you're careful. Over the next few days, you start producing small amounts of urine again, dark and concentrated and not nearly enough, but more than nothing. The toxins in your blood begin to decrease, slowly, as your damaged kidneys struggle to filter what they can. Your thinking clears slightly, not back to normal. You're still confused and slow, but you can track conversations now, understand when someone's talking to you, form responses that make sense. Brother Aldwin attributes this to the power of prayer and the natural course of recovery. The woman in grey knows better, but she doesn't say anything because she never says anything. She just continues her work, bringing you water in small, careful amounts, helping you sit up for a few minutes each day to prevent your lungs from filling with fluid, changing the linens when you're too weak to move yourself. The boy with the broken arm is discharged after 10 days, his splint's still in place but his general health good enough that he can recover at home. You watch him leave with his mother, a tired-looking woman in a patched dress who thanks the monks profusely and presses a small coin into Brother Aldwin's hand as payment. It's probably all she can afford. Healthcare in medieval times operated on a combination of charity and whatever payment people could manage. Rich patients paid in silver or gold, poor patients paid in labour or goods, a chicken, a sack of grain, whatever they had. The very poorest paid nothing and relied entirely on the charity of religious institutions, which was substantial but inconsistent. The monastery infirmary treated everyone, but the quality of treatment varied depending on what resources were available. You got an emerald because the monastery happened to have some. Another patient might get only herbs and prayer because that's all there was. You're moved to a different part of the infirmary after 2 weeks. A smaller room with only one other patient, an elderly monk who's dying of something that's making him waste away slowly, his skin loose over his bones, his eyes sunken. He sleeps most of the time, and when he's awake he prays quietly, his lips moving over familiar Latin phrases that he's been saying every day for 50 years. You don't talk to him, and he doesn't talk to you. You just exist in the same space, two people at different stages of the same journey. He's at the end. You're somewhere in the middle, not recovered but no longer actively dying, just damaged and trying to figure out how to live with a body that doesn't work the way it used to. Your back still aches constantly, that deep pain where your kidneys are, and you're tired all the time, exhausted by the effort of just being alive, but you're breathing on your own. Your heart is beating steadily. You can drink water without vomiting. These things count as victories. Brother Aldwin checks on you less frequently now that you're stable. He has other patients who need more immediate attention, and his time is limited. But he still comes by every few days, feels your forehead, asks how you're feeling, nods approvingly at whatever answer you give. He's added you to his mental list of successful treatments, proof that his methods work when applied correctly. 3 weeks into your stay at the infirmary, you're able to walk on your own for the first time, shuffling slowly across the room with one hand braced against the wall for balance. Your legs feel like they belong to someone else, weak and unsteady, and the room tilts slightly with each step, but you make it to the window and back without falling. The woman in grey watches from her spot near the door, and when you collapse back onto your mattress breathing hard from the exertion, she brings you water and a piece of bread softened in honey. You eat slowly, and your stomach accepts it, which feels like another small miracle even though it's just your digestive system remembering how to do its job. The bread tastes better than anything you can remember eating, sweet and soft and real, and you take your time with it, making it last, savouring the simple fact that you can eat without immediately being sick. The elderly monk in the other bed dies quietly one morning while you're sleeping. You wake up and he's just gone, his body already removed, his mattress stripped bare. The woman in grey is sweeping the floor where his bed was, erasing the evidence of his presence with efficient strokes of her broom. You never learned his name, never had a conversation with him, but his absence changes the room somehow, makes it feel larger and lonelier. Death was so common in medieval times that it didn't always warrant much ceremony unless the person was important. A monk who died of old age in an infirmary got prayers and a burial in the monastery cemetery, a simple wooden cross to mark the spot, and then life continued. The bells rang the same way. The other monks went about their duties. Someone else would eventually need that bed, and when they did, it would be ready. Brother Aldwin comes to tell you that you're well enough to leave soon, maybe in another week if you continue improving. He seems pleased with your recovery, though he's also puzzled by how long it's taking. Most patients who survive a fever are back on their feet within a week or two, but you're different, slower, still weak in ways that don't fit the usual patterns. He attributes it to your humours being severely disrupted, requiring more time than normal to return to balance. He gives you instructions for continued care at home. Avoid cold and damp. Eat warming foods like meat and wine and bread. Get moderate exercise but don't overexert yourself. Pray regularly. Return if the fever comes back. He doesn't mention the emerald treatment except to note that it may have saved your life, but the cooling properties of the stone counteracted the heat of your illness. You don't contradict him because what would be the point? You don't have the knowledge to explain what actually happened, and even if you did, he wouldn't believe you. Medical authority flows downward from ancient texts through educated monks to patients, never the other direction. The woman in grey helps you prepare for departure. She washes your clothes, which have been sitting in a basket this entire time, and hangs them to dry in a courtyard where the sun hits for a few hours each afternoon. She brings you soap and water so you can wash yourself more thoroughly than you have in weeks. And the cold water on your skin makes you gasp, but also makes you feel more human, more like yourself. She even combs your hair, working through the tangles with patient fingers, and for someone who never speaks, she communicates a tremendous amount through touch, through the gentleness of her hands and the care she takes not to hurt you. When she's finished, she looks at you for a long moment, and there's something in her expression that might be satisfaction or relief or sadness. You can't quite tell. Then she pats your shoulder once and goes back to her other tasks, sweeping and grinding herbs and tending to a new patient who arrived yesterday with a badly infected cut on his leg that's already showing the red streaks of blood poisoning. You spend your last few days in the infirmary mostly sitting by the window, watching the monastery garden and the comings and goings of monks in the courtyard. The world outside looks different to you now, sharper somehow, more precious. You notice things you wouldn't have noticed before. The way light moves across the stone walls as the sun travels, the particular green of new leaves on the apple trees, a cat that lives in the monastery, sleek and grey, that hunts mice in the grain storage and sleeps in patches of sun. You're aware, in a way you weren't before you got sick, that you almost didn't get to see any of this again, that you were maybe hours away from dying in that bed, your body destroyed by a treatment that was supposed to heal you. The knowledge sits in your chest like a stone, heavy and permanent. You survived, but survival came with costs you're only beginning to understand. Your body will never work quite right again. Your kidneys are damaged in ways that will affect you for whatever time you have left. You'll tire easily. You'll have to be careful about what you eat and drink. You'll probably die younger than you would have otherwise. But you're alive, and spring is happening outside the window, and the cat has caught a mouse and is carrying it proudly across the courtyard. On your last morning in the infirmary, Brother Aldwin gives you a small cloth packet tied with string. Inside are dried herbs, he explains, sage and feverfew and a few others, enough for several weeks. If you feel the fever returning, you should brew these into a tea and drink it twice daily. He's also written a short note on a scrap of parchment, just a few lines in Latin, explaining your treatment for any other physician or healer you might encounter. The note mentions the severity of your fever, the bloodletting, the emerald therapy. It's a medical history that gets the facts right and the interpretation completely wrong, but it's what you have, a record of your illness written in a language you can't read. You take it carefully and tuck it into your clothes along with the herb packet, and you thank Brother Aldwin because gratitude is what's expected, and also because despite everything, despite the bloodletting and the emerald poisoning and the near-death experience, he was trying to help. His intentions were good even when his methods were catastrophic. The woman in grey walks with you to the monastery gate. She's carrying a small basket with a loaf of bread and a skin of watered wine. Provisions for your journey home, which isn't far, maybe an hour's walk, but in your current condition might take twice that long. At the gate she stops and sets the basket down and looks at you with those eyes that have seen too much suffering. She reaches into her apron pocket and pulls out something small wrapped in a piece of cloth, presses it into your hand. When you unwrap it later, you'll find a small carved wooden cross, the kind pilgrims buy at shrines, worn smooth from handling. It's not valuable, not in any material sense, but it's hers and she gave it to you, and that makes it precious. She still doesn't speak, but she touches your cheek once, gently, the way a mother might, and then she turns and walks back into the monastery, her grey dress blending into the stone walls until you can't see her anymore. You walk slowly down the road that leads away from the monastery, the basket heavy on your arm, the spring morning cool and bright around you. Your body aches with every step, your back especially, that deep persistent pain that you're learning to live with. But you're moving, you're walking, you're going home. The road is familiar even though you barely remember the journey here, fever sick and half carried by family members who were terrified you were going to die. You pass fields where peasants are working, ploughing and planting, their figures small against the enormous sky. You pass a stream where someone's washing clothes, slapping them against rocks to get them clean. You pass a shrine to the Virgin Mary, just a small wooden statue in a niche carved into a large stone, and you stop there to rest and say a prayer. Not because you're particularly devout, but because it seems like the thing to do after surviving what you survived. The prayer is simple, just thank you, repeated several times, and you're not entirely sure who you're thanking. God maybe, or the Virgin, or Saint Luke, or the woman in grey who stopped Brother Aldwin from giving you that third dose of emerald. Maybe all of them. Maybe none of them. Maybe you're just grateful to still be breathing, still walking, still experiencing the world with all its ordinary beauties and discomforts. A bee lands on your hand and walks across your knuckles before flying away. The stream makes its endless babbling sound. Somewhere a church bell rings the hour. You pick up your basket and continue walking, and with each step you're moving further from the infirmary and closer to home, to whatever life you're going to have now with your damaged kidneys and your knowledge that medicine can kill you just as easily as disease can. You think about the other patients you saw in the infirmary, the man with the cough who disappeared, the woman with childbed fever who was carried out wrapped in cloth, the elderly monk who died quietly, the boy with the broken arm who walked out healed and whole. There was no pattern to who lived and who died, no logic that you could discern. Good treatments and bad treatments got applied seemingly at random, and outcomes depended more on luck than anything else. You were lucky in the end, lucky that the woman in grey intervened, lucky that your body had enough resilience to survive the damage, lucky in ways you didn't earn and don't deserve but get to benefit from anyway. Other patients weren't lucky and they died, and nobody learned anything from their deaths because there was no system in place for learning. Medical knowledge was passed down from authorities, not built up from observation. You reach your house just as the sun is climbing toward midday, and your mother sees you coming from the garden where she's pulling weeds from between the vegetables. She drops everything and runs toward you, and there's a moment where you think she might knock you over with the force of her embrace, but she stops herself just in time, remembering that you're still fragile, still recovering. Instead, she holds your face in her dirt-stained hands and looks at you like she's trying to memorize every detail, like she's confirming that you're really here, really alive, not a ghost or a fever dream. She's been praying every day, she tells you, lighting candles at the church, offering what little she could spare to ensure prayers were said for your recovery. She thought you were going to die. Everyone thought you were going to die. When your brother carried you to the monastery 3 weeks ago, you were barely conscious, burning with fever, and she prepared herself for the news that you hadn't survived the night. But you did survive, and now you're home, and she's crying and laughing at the same time, pulling you toward the house where your father and siblings are waiting. Your father is more reserved in his relief, the way men of his generation often are, but you can see it in how his jaw tightens, how he grips your shoulder firmly and nods, and that's enough. Your younger siblings crowd around asking questions. What was the monastery like? Did the monks really heal you with magic? Can they see your scars? And your mother shoos them away. Tells them to give you space. You need to rest. She's already thinking practically, planning what to feed you, where you'll sleep, how to help you regain your strength. The house is small, just 2 rooms, one for living and one for sleeping, with a loft where the children sleep on straw mattresses. It smells like home, wood smoke and cooking, and the particular mustiness of a dwelling that's never quite dry, and you've never been more grateful for anything in your life. They put you in the good bed, the one your parents usually sleep in, and your mother brings you soup that's been simmering over the fire, made with a chicken she must have killed specifically for your homecoming because chicken isn't something your family eats often. It's thin but flavorful, with pieces of meat and some vegetables and barley. and you eat it slowly, your stomach still uncertain about accepting food. She watches you eat with the focused attention of someone monitoring a patient, and when you finish about half the bowl, she doesn't push you to eat more, just takes it away and tells you to rest. Your father and the older children go back to their work, the spring planting that can't wait no matter who's sick or recovering, and the house settles into a quieter rhythm with just you and your mother and the youngest child who's maybe 4 years old, and keeps peeking at you from around the doorframe, like you might disappear if she's not watching. Sleep comes easily, the deep exhausted sleep of someone who's finally safe, finally home, and when you wake up it's late afternoon and the light slanting through the small window has turned golden. You can hear your family outside, voices and laughter and the sound of someone chopping wood. Your body still aches, especially your lower back where the kidney damage is permanent, and you're still weak enough that just walking to the corner of the room to use the chamber pot leaves you breathless. But you're here, you're home, and slowly, carefully your body begins to remember what it's like to exist without being constantly under assault from either disease or treatment. Over the next few days you settle into a routine of eating small amounts, sleeping long hours, and taking short walks around the house and garden when you have the energy. Your mother makes you drink the herbal tea that Brother Aldwin sent home with you, even though you're not sure it does anything beyond making you have to urinate more frequently, which given your kidney situation is actually not helpful. But she believes in it, believes that the monastery medicine is what saved you, and you don't have the heart to tell her that the monastery medicine almost killed you. What would be the point? She wouldn't understand the concept of iatrogenic illness, of treatment-caused harm, because nobody understands that yet. The framework doesn't exist. So you drink the tea and let her believe it's helping, and maybe in some small way it is, if only because belief itself can have effects on how you feel, how you approach recovery. Your siblings are curious about your time in the infirmary, and when you have energy you tell them stories, carefully edited versions that leave out the worst parts. You tell them about the monastery bells and the monks singing their prayers, and the garden full of medicinal herbs. You tell them about the boy with the broken arm who got better. You don't tell them about the people who died, about the woman who had childbed fever or the elderly monk who wasted away, or how close you came to joining them. A week after you return home, a travelling physician passes through your village, the kind of man who goes from town to town offering his services, carrying his tools and medicines in a leather satchel strapped across his chest. He's not a monk, not trained in a monastery, but he's read some of the same texts, learned from the same tradition of humoral medicine that nearly killed you. Your mother, still worried about your slow recovery, asks him to examine you. She pays him with 3 eggs and a small piece of cheese, probably more than your family can afford, but she's desperate for reassurance that you're healing properly. The physician is younger than Brother Aldwin, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and hands that move quickly and confidently. He has you sit on a stool in the doorway where the light is good, and he goes through the standard examination. Feels your forehead and neck, looks at your tongue, checks your pulse at your wrist and your neck, examines your eyes, pulling down the lower lids to look at the colour. He asks questions about your symptoms, your appetite, your sleep, how much you're urinating. When he gets to that last question you hesitate because the answer is embarrassing. Not much, not nearly as much as you should be. Maybe a cup or 2 a day, dark and concentrated, sometimes with traces of blood still. The physician frowns at this information and asks more questions. Is there pain? Yes, in your lower back, constant. Swelling in your feet or legs? Some, especially by evening. He presses his fingers into your shin and the skin stays indented for a moment after he removes them, a sign of fluid retention that your damaged kidneys can't properly manage. His frown deepens, and he asks to see the note that Brother Aldwin wrote. Your mother fetches it from where she's been keeping it carefully wrapped in cloth, and the physician reads it, his lips moving slightly over the Latin words. After a long moment, he looks up at you and then at your mother, and his expression is professionally neutral in the way that means he's about to deliver news that nobody wants to hear. Your kidneys are damaged, he tells her using the medieval term the reins, and the damage appears to be permanent. You'll need to be careful for the rest of your life, avoiding certain foods, drinking plenty of water but not too much, watching for signs of worsening function. He doesn't say it directly, but the implication is clear. You're not going to fully recover. This is as good as it gets. Your mother's face goes pale, and she asks the question that's really on her mind. How long? How long do you have? The physician shrugs, not callously but practically. Impossible to say. Could be years if you're careful. Could be months if infection sets in, or if the kidneys fail further. God will decide, he adds, because that's how medical prognosis worked in medieval times, a combination of observable symptoms and divine will. What he doesn't ask, what never occurs to him to ask, is what treatment you received at the monastery. He sees the note mentioning emerald therapy, and nods approvingly, commenting that emeralds are excellent for kidney ailments, very cooling and purifying. He doesn't connect the emerald to the kidney damage because why would he? Emeralds are medicine. Medicine doesn't cause the problems it's supposed to solve. That's not how anyone thinks about treatment in this period. So he recommends continued herbal teas, moderate exercise, prayer, and possibly more emerald therapy if you can afford it, which you absolutely cannot and wouldn't take if you could. He leaves your family with this advice and continues on to the next village, and your mother sits down heavily on the stool you just vacated, looking older than she did 10 minutes ago. The knowledge that your condition is permanent settles over your household like a weight. Your father becomes quieter, more withdrawn, probably calculating how much work you'll be able to do, how this will affect the family's ability to farm their small plot of land. Your siblings don't fully understand, but they sense the change in atmosphere, the adults speaking in low, worried voices when they think the children aren't listening. You feel guilty in a way that's hard to articulate. Guilty for being sick, guilty for surviving but not recovering fully, guilty for the burden your damaged body will place on your family. In medieval peasant families, everyone had to contribute to survival. There was no safety net, no disability support, just family members helping each other because that's what you did. If you can't work as hard as you used to, someone else will have to work harder to compensate. But your mother, after her initial shock, becomes fiercely practical about it. You're alive, she says, and that's what matters. You'll do what you can do, and the family will adjust. She starts giving you lighter tasks, things that don't require heavy physical labor, mending clothes, watching the younger children, preparing food, spinning wool, work that can be done sitting down, that doesn't exhaust you completely. Your father accepts this reorganization without comment, and your older siblings take on more of the field work without complaining, at least not where you can hear them. The family adjusts because families do, because survival requires flexibility and pragmatism and love that expresses itself through action rather than words. Summer arrives slowly, the days lengthening and warming, and you find a rhythm in your diminished life. Mornings you help your mother in the garden, pulling weeds and harvesting vegetables, work that you can do at your own pace, sitting on the ground when you need to rest. The pain in your back is constant, but you're learning to work around it, to move in ways that don't aggravate it too much, to recognize when you need to stop before you push yourself into complete exhaustion. Your younger sister, the 4-year-old, has decided you're her favorite person and follows you everywhere, chattering about things that seem important to her, a beetle she found, a flower that's blooming, a story she made up about a cat that can talk. You listen and respond when you have energy, and when you don't, she seems content just to be near you, playing in the dirt while you work. The village is small enough that everyone knows about your illness and your incomplete recovery, and people have opinions about it the way people always have opinions about medical matters. The baker's wife tells your mother that you should be eating more red meat to build up your blood, even though your family can't afford red meat more than a few times a year. The blacksmith says you need to be bled again, that obviously the monastery didn't remove enough corrupted humors. An old woman who lives at the edge of the village and grows herbs in a garden that everyone whispers might be involved in witchcraft, though probably she's just a competent herbalist, sends a bundle of nettle and dandelion with instructions to make a tea that will help your kidneys flush toxins. You try the tea because it can't make things worse, and actually it might help a little. Or maybe you're just having a better day. It's impossible to tell. Medieval healthcare is full of these small uncertain interventions, things that might work or might not, remedies passed down through generations based on someone's grandmother's observation that it seemed to help once. Your mother takes you to church every Sunday, more regularly than your family used to go, because she believes your survival is a miracle that requires appropriate gratitude. The church is small and dark and smells like incense and centuries of candle smoke absorbed into stone. The priest, an old man whose Latin is barely better than Brother Aldwin's, gives sermons about sin and redemption, and the importance of accepting God's will. You sit in the back with your family and let the words wash over you, not really listening but finding something comforting in the ritual of it, the familiar patterns of standing and kneeling and reciting prayers that everyone knows by heart. After Mass, the priest sometimes asks about your health, and you tell him you're improving slowly, which is close enough to the truth. He nods and says he'll continue praying for you, and you thank him, and that's the extent of your spiritual counsel. What you don't tell anyone, not your mother or the priest or even your siblings, is how your relationship with your body has changed. Before you got sick, you never thought about your body much at all. It was just there, doing what bodies do, mostly reliable, occasionally uncomfortable, but fundamentally something you could trust. Now you're aware of it constantly, monitoring every sensation, every ache, every sign that something might be going wrong. You notice when your urine is darker than usual, or when there's blood in it again. You notice when the swelling in your ankles is worse, when your back pain intensifies, when you're more tired than you should be. Your body has become something you have to manage carefully, negotiate with, coax into functioning. It's exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with physical tiredness. This constant vigilance, this awareness that your survival depends on paying attention to signals that most people can ignore. By midsummer, you're strong enough to walk to the village market with your mother, carrying a basket of eggs to trade for flour and salt. The market is small, just a dozen vendors set up in the square near the church, but it's crowded and loud and overwhelming after weeks of mostly staying home. People call out prices and haggle over goods, and laugh and argue, and the sheer aliveness of it is almost too much. You buy what you need quickly, and retreat to the edge of the market, sitting on a low wall while your mother finishes her trading. An old man sits down next to you, someone you don't know, and he asks in a friendly way what's wrong with you, because apparently your frailty is visible enough that strangers notice. You tell him you were sick, you're recovering, and he nods sagely and says that when he was young he had a fever that nearly killed him, and the cure was being buried up to his neck in warm earth for 3 days. The earth drew out the sickness, he explains, pulled it right out of his body and into the ground where it belonged. You have no idea if this story is true or if the warm earth burial had anything to do with his recovery, or if he's just an old man who likes to tell stories about the past. But you nod politely and listen, because that's what you do. Autumn comes with its usual work, the harvest that determines whether your family will have enough food to survive the winter. You help where you can, though you're limited to lighter tasks, binding sheaves of wheat after others have cut them, sorting vegetables, shelling beans. Your father and older brothers do the heavy work, cutting grain with sickles from dawn until dusk, their backs bent for hours, their hands blistered despite calluses that have been building up for years. It's brutal labour, the kind that uses every bit of a person's strength, and you're quietly grateful that you're not expected to do it anymore even though the reason for your exemption is permanent kidney damage. Your mother works just as hard, organising the harvest, preserving food for winter, making sure nothing is wasted. Every apple that falls, every cabbage that grows, every egg the chickens lay, all of it has to be accounted for and stored carefully because there won't be fresh food again until spring. One evening as you're sitting outside shelling beans, your hands working in the automatic rhythm that comes from repetitive tasks, your younger brother asks you what it was like to almost die. He's maybe 12, old enough to be curious about death but young enough that it still seems distant and theoretical to him. You stop shelling for a moment and think about how to answer. What was it like? Mostly it was confusing, you tell him, and tiring, and sometimes frightening but not in the way you'd expect, not like being chased by something, more like sinking slowly into water and not being sure if you'd be able to surface again. He considers this answer with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult experiences, then asks if you saw heaven or angels or anything like that. No, you tell him, nothing like that, just fever dreams that didn't make sense, and long periods of not being fully conscious. He looks disappointed, probably hoping for a more dramatic story, something he could retell to his friends. Your father has been quieter than usual since harvest started, and one night after everyone else is asleep, you hear him and your mother talking in low voices in the next room. You're not trying to eavesdrop, but the walls are thin and sound carries. He's worried about the coming winter, about whether you'll survive it. Your kidneys are weak, your body is compromised, and winter illnesses kill even healthy people regularly. If you catch a fever, if you develop a cough that turns into lung sickness, if anything goes wrong, you might not have the strength to fight it off. Your mother's voice is firm in response. They'll be careful, they'll keep you warm and fed, they'll do everything possible. But you can hear the worry underneath her certainty, the knowledge that sometimes everything possible isn't enough. You lie in your bed in the loft, listening to them discuss your potential death as a practical matter that needs to be planned for, and you feel a strange mixture of emotions. Fear, obviously, but also a kind of detached acceptance. You almost died once already. The second time might come sooner than anyone wants, and there's nothing much you can do about it except try to stay alive day by day. The first real cold snap arrives in late October, and with it comes a reminder of exactly how fragile your health is now. Your back pain intensifies with the cold, a deep aching that makes it hard to sleep, and you notice you're urinating even less than usual. Your body's struggling to function in the lower temperatures. Your mother keeps the fire going constantly, burns through firewood faster than she should because keeping you warm is worth the cost. She makes you drink hot herbal teas, wraps you in every blanket the family owns, keeps you as close to the fire as possible. Your siblings complain about the heat sometimes, the stuffiness of the house with the fire going day and night, but your mother shuts down those complaints quickly. They're healthy, she reminds them. They can tolerate being too warm. You don't have that luxury. A week into the cold weather, a neighbour's child dies of a fever. A girl maybe 6 years old who was playing outside just days before. The whole village turns out for the burial, a small procession to the churchyard, where the priest says prayers over a grave that looks too small to hold a person. Your mother grips your hand tightly during the service, and you know she's thinking about how easily that could be you, how close you came, how uncertain your future still is. Death is so common in medieval life that people develop a kind of practiced grief, a way of mourning that's sincere but also practical, because if you fell apart completely at every death you'd never be able to function. The girl's mother is crying, supported by other women, and the father's face is like stone, and the siblings look confused and scared, and everyone else stands in the cold paying respects before returning to their own lives, their own survival. That night you dream about the infirmary, about lying on the straw mattress with fever, about Brother Aldwin holding the cup of wine with emerald powder glittering in it, about the woman in grey reaching out to stop him. Winter settles in fully by November, bringing the kind of cold that seeps into everything, into the walls and the floors and your bones, the kind of cold that makes your damaged kidneys ache, with a persistence that keeps you awake at night. Your family huddles closer together for warmth, everyone sleeping in the main room now instead of the loft because heat rises and the ground floor is warmer. You're positioned closest to the fire always, wrapped in the good wool blanket that usually gets saved for special occasions. And your mother checks on you constantly, feeling your forehead for fever, making sure you're warm enough, bringing you water even though drinking at night means you'll have to get up to use the chamber pot and disturb everyone. Your father has stopped complaining about the firewood. He just cuts more, brings it in, stacks it against the wall, an endless cycle of trying to keep the cold at bay. The village becomes quieter in winter, people staying inside as much as possible, venturing out only when necessary. There's less work to do without crops to tend, so your family spends the dark months on indoor tasks. Your father repairs tools, makes new handles for axes and hoes, fixes everything that broke during harvest season. Your mother spins wool into thread, weaves cloth on a small loom, mends clothes that have been worn thin. You help with these tasks when you have energy, your hands staying busy even when your body is too tired for anything more demanding. Your younger siblings grow restless with the confinement, their energy needing outlet, and sometimes they get into fights over nothing, small disputes that escalate because there's nowhere to go to escape each other. Your mother separates them with practiced efficiency, assigns them tasks to keep them occupied, tells stories on the longest, darkest nights about saints and heroes and ordinary people who survived extraordinary things. You think about the monastery sometimes, wonder how Brother Aldwin is doing, whether he's treating other patients with emerald, whether anyone else has died from his well-intentioned poisoning. You wonder about the woman in grey, whether she's still there, still silently observing, still saving patients when she can by interfering with treatments at the last possible moment. You wonder if she ever speaks, if her silence is a vow or a choice or something else entirely. You'll probably never see either of them again. The monastery is hours away and you have no reason to return, and even if you did, what would you say? Thank you for almost killing me? Thank you for stopping before you finished the job? The gratitude and the anger are so mixed up in your mind that you can't separate them, can't figure out how to feel about people who saved your life and nearly ended it, sometimes in the same action. A peddler comes through the village in December, one of the few travellers still moving during winter, and he brings news from other places. There's been plague in the cities, he says, the kind that kills quickly, people healthy in the morning and dead by evening, bodies piling up faster than they can be buried. Your village is remote enough that it might escape, but everyone listens to his news with the particular tension of people who know that disease doesn't respect distance or borders, that plague can arrive anywhere, any time, carried by travellers or rats or simply the will of God. The peddler also has goods to sell, needles and thread and small luxuries that most people can't afford, ribbons and copper bells and a few books for anyone wealthy enough to read. Your mother buys needles because needles are essential and break easily, but that's all. Your family's resources are stretched thin, every coin and traded good carefully rationed to last until spring. The peddler looks at you, sitting by the fire wrapped in blankets, and asks if you're sick. Your mother explains quickly, no, not sick anymore, recovered from a fever but still weak, still building strength back. The peddler nods knowingly and says he has something that might help, reaches into his pack and pulls out a small glass vial filled with liquid that's supposed to be a universal tonic, good for weakness and fever and digestive troubles and general malaise. He lists ingredients that sound impressive. Exotic things like myrrh and frankincense and ground unicorn horn, though the unicorn horn is probably just narwhal tusk or some other animal bone, ground up and relabeled. Your mother looks tempted, desperate enough for anything that might help you that she's willing to consider spending money she doesn't have on medicine from a travelling stranger. But you shake your head, tell her you don't need it, you're fine with what you have. She looks hurt for a moment, like you're rejecting her care, but then she understands. You don't trust medicine anymore. Not from monks, not from physicians, not from peddlers. You've learned that the things that are supposed to heal you can kill you, and right now, doing nothing seems safer than doing something. The peddler moves on after selling his needles and a few other items, heading to the next village, carrying his goods and his news and his dubious tonics. Christmas arrives with its small celebrations, a break in the winter darkness that everyone welcomes even if they're too poor to celebrate elaborately. Your family goes to church for the special mass, the building packed with people seeking warmth and community and whatever comfort religion can offer. The priest has decorated the altar with evergreen branches and candles, and the service is longer than usual, more singing, more prayers, the Latin words rising up into the cold stone vault of the ceiling. Someone brought a small carved nativity scene, Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus in a manger, surrounded by animals that look vaguely like the sheep and cows everyone in the village knows. Your younger siblings are fascinated by the figures, and after the service they're allowed to look closely, to touch the worn wood carefully, to imagine the story made physical and real. Your mother managed to save a chicken for Christmas dinner, and also made a sweet pudding with dried fruit and honey, luxuries that appear only a few times a year. The meal is eaten slowly, everyone savouring it, and for a few hours the house feels almost festive despite the cold and the worry and the general hardship of winter. Your father even smiles, rare enough that your siblings notice and smile back, and there's singing after dinner, old songs that everyone knows, your mother's voice carrying the melody while others join in harmony. You sing too, quietly, your voice weak but present, and you realise this is the first time in months that you felt something close to happiness, not the absence of misery but actual positive feeling, warmth that has nothing to do with the fire. But the feeling doesn't last, because feelings never do, they're temporary by nature, and by the next day everything is back to normal. The cold, the routine, the careful rationing of food and warmth and energy. Your back aches, your body is tired, the winter stretches ahead long and dark and dangerous, and you're just trying to survive it one day at a time. Your mother has started mixing ash into your food sometimes, just a tiny amount stirred into porridge or soup, because someone told her that ash helps with kidney troubles. You don't know if there's any truth to it, if ash has any medical properties at all, or if it's just another folk remedy based on nothing but hope and desperation. But you eat it anyway, because refusing would hurt her feelings, and the ash doesn't taste like much, just adds a slightly gritty texture that you learn to ignore. January is the hardest month, the cold reaching its deepest point, the food stores starting to run low, everyone in the village looking a little thinner, a little more worn. Your family eats porridge for most meals now, oats cooked with water, sometimes with a little salt if they're feeling generous with their supplies, occasionally with a piece of turnip or a bit of dried meat, but mostly just oats. It's bland and monotonous, but it's filling, and it keeps you alive, and that's what matters. You notice you're losing weight, your clothes hanging looser, your face looking gaunt when you catch a reflection in the bucket of water. Your mother notices too and starts giving you larger portions, taking less for herself, a sacrifice she makes without mentioning it, without expecting thanks. That's what mothers do in this world, in any world. They give what they have even when they don't have enough. A late January storm traps your family inside for 3 days, snow piling against the door so high that your father has to dig a path just to get outside to the woodpile. The house feels even smaller during the storm, all of you confined together with nothing to do but wait for the weather to change, and tensions run high. Your siblings fight more, your parents speak to each other in short, clipped sentences. You try to stay out of everyone's way, make yourself as unobtrusive as possible, aware that your presence, your needs, your constant requirement for warmth and attention adds stress to an already stressful situation. On the 3rd day, when the storm finally breaks and weak sunlight filters through the clouds, everyone emerges from the house relieved, grateful to have space again, to breathe air that isn't thick with wood smoke and too many bodies in too small a room. You make it through January, and then February arrives, still cold but with the occasional hint that winter won't last forever. Days where the sun feels almost warm, where icicles start to drip from the roof edges, where you can imagine spring coming eventually even if it's not here yet. By late February, you've survived 5 months since leaving the monastery, which feels like an achievement worth noting even if nobody's keeping track. Your body has settled into its new limited capacity, and you've learned to read its signals, to know when you're pushing too hard, when you need to rest, when the back pain means you should drink more water or drink less water, the constant calibration of someone living with organ damage in an era with no medical monitoring. Your urine output has stabilized at a low level, maybe a third of what it should be, dark and concentrated, occasionally still tinged with blood. You've stopped being alarmed by the blood. It's just part of your reality now, like the pain and the fatigue and the swelling in your ankles that gets worse as the day progresses. You're alive, and alive looks different than it used to, and you're adapting because the alternative is giving up. The village healer, the old woman who lives at the edge of town with her herb garden, sends word through your mother that she'd like to see you. She doesn't receive visitors often, and when she does, it's usually because someone is desperate enough to risk the village, whispers about witchcraft and dark practices. But your mother goes to see her first, without you, and comes back saying the woman just wants to examine you, that she's treated kidney troubles before and might have suggestions. You're skeptical, given your experience with medical treatment, but your mother is hopeful in a way that's hard to refuse, so you agree to visit. Your father walks with you, partly to help if you get tired, partly because he doesn't like the idea of you going alone to see someone the village regards with suspicion, even if that suspicion is probably unfounded. The healer's cottage is small and dark, with bundles of dried herbs hanging from every rafter, making the air smell green and medicinal and slightly dusty. She's older than you expected, maybe 70, with hands that shake slightly with age but eyes that are sharp and assessing. She gestures for you to sit on a stool near the window where the light is best, and she examines you without speaking, her fingers pressing gently on your abdomen, on your lower back where the kidneys are, on the swollen areas around your ankles. She asks questions: how much you urinate, what colour, any pain, any bleeding, how's your appetite, how's your energy. And you answer honestly, because what's the point of lying to someone who's trying to help? When you're done answering, she sits back and looks at you for a long moment, and her expression is sad in a way that makes your stomach drop. She tells you, in a voice that's surprisingly gentle, that your kidneys are badly damaged, probably beyond repair, and that you need to be very careful if you want to live a long life. She doesn't promise that you will live a long life, just that carefulness might help. She gives you specific instructions, practical things based on observation rather than theory. Drink water, but not so much that you feel bloated. Avoid salt because it makes swelling worse. Eat foods that are easy to digest, porridge and vegetables and fish if you can get it. Avoid heavy physical labor that's exhausting you completely, and most importantly, avoid physicians and their treatments. She says this last part with particular emphasis, looking directly at you, and you realize she knows. Not the specifics maybe, not about the emerald poisoning, but she knows that your kidney damage was caused by treatment, not by illness. She's seen it before, patients who went to monasteries or physicians with treatable conditions and came back dying from the cure. She gives your mother a bundle of herbs, dandelion root and nettle mostly, with instructions to make a tea that will help your kidneys flush what they can without overworking them. She refuses payment, waves away your father's offer of a chicken or labour or whatever he can spare. Just keep that child alive, she tells your mother, and be careful who you trust with their care. Then she ushers you out, back into the cold February air, and your father walks you home in silence, processing what the healer said, the implications of it. That night, your parents have another of their low-voiced conversations that you're not supposed to hear but do anyway. Your father is angry, not at you but at the situation, at the fact that the monastery medicine that was supposed to save you instead crippled you. Your mother is defensive, saying how could they have known, everyone said the monastery was the best place to take someone with a serious fever. They argue quietly, circular arguments that go nowhere because there's nowhere for them to go, no way to undo what's been done. You lie in your bed in the loft, listening to them, and you think about Brother Aldwin holding that cup of emerald-laced wine, about the woman in grey stopping him from giving you the 3rd dose, about all the tiny moments where your life could have gone differently. March brings the first real signs of spring, and with them comes a cautious optimism that maybe you're going to make it through. The days get longer, warmer, and the snow melts in uneven patches, revealing the brown earth underneath. Your family starts preparing for planting season, checking seeds saved from last year, repairing the plough, getting ready for the endless work that farming requires. You're able to help more now that it's warmer, your body functioning slightly better when it's not fighting constant cold, and you spend hours in the garden with your mother turning over soil, pulling out the dead plants from last year, preparing the ground for vegetables. The work is meditative, repetitive, your hands in the dirt, the sun on your back, and you find yourself thinking less about the monastery and more about the immediate present, the work in front of you, the life you're actually living rather than the life you almost lost. A peddler comes through in mid-March, different from the one in December, and this one brings news that makes everyone in the village go quiet. The plague that was in the cities has spread to some of the larger towns, moving outward in ripples, and there are rumours of whole villages being abandoned, everyone either dead or fled. Plague is the terror that underlies medieval life, the disease that can wipe out entire populations, that kills without pattern or mercy, that makes people abandon their own family members out of fear of contagion. Your village is small and remote, which offers some protection, but not enough to feel safe. If plague comes here, there's nowhere to run, no hospitals or treatments or any real defense except prayer and luck. The peddler himself looks healthy, but that doesn't mean much because people can carry plague without showing symptoms right away, and there's a tension in the village after he leaves, people avoiding each other slightly, watching for signs of illness in themselves and their neighbours. Your mother becomes even more protective of you after hearing the plague news, barely letting you out of her sight, convinced that your weakened state makes you particularly vulnerable. She's probably right. If plague comes to your village and you catch it, your damaged kidneys and generally compromised health mean you'd have almost no chance of survival. But you can't live in constant fear either, can't spend every day waiting for disaster, so you try to focus on the things you can control, eating well, resting enough, staying as healthy as possible within your limitations. Your younger sister, who's 5 now, doesn't understand the plague worries, and her obliviousness is almost refreshing, the way she still plays and laughs and demands attention, reminding everyone that life continues regardless of threats. By late March, the plague rumours have faded without the disease appearing in your village, and everyone relaxes slightly, goes back to their normal routines, the constant background anxiety of medieval life returning to manageable levels. Your family plants the garden, neat rows of peas and beans and cabbages and onions, the same vegetables they plant every year, and you help water them in the evenings, carrying bucket after bucket from the well, careful not to overdo it, stopping when your back starts to ache too much. The repetition is soothing, the predictability of seasonal work, and you start to believe that maybe this is going to be okay, maybe you can have a life despite everything, a smaller life than you would have had but a life nonetheless. One evening in early April, you're sitting outside watching the sunset, the sky going pink and gold, and your younger brother sits down next to you. He's quiet for a while, just watching the sky with you, and then he asks if you're scared of dying. The question is so direct that you almost laugh, but he's serious, genuinely wanting to know, so you think about it before answering. You tell him that you were scared when you were sick, when you thought you might die soon, but now you're less scared. Not because the danger has passed, because it hasn't. Your body is still damaged and could fail at any time, but because you've lived with that knowledge for months now and the fear has dulled into something more like acceptance. You're going to die eventually, everyone is, and maybe it'll be sooner for you than for other people, but right now you're alive and the sunset is beautiful and that's enough. Spring fully establishes itself by late April, and with it comes a visitor you weren't expecting. Brother Aldwin arrives at your house one morning, riding a donkey, his brown robe dusty from travel. Your mother sees him first and her face lights up with the kind of joy reserved for someone she believes saved her child's life. She calls you outside, and when you see the monk dismounting, your feelings are complicated in ways you can't quite articulate. Part of you is genuinely glad to see him, this man who cared for you when you were dying, who sat with you and prayed over you and genuinely tried to help. Another part of you looks at him and sees the person who poisoned you with ground emerald, who nearly killed you with treatment, who still has no idea what he did wrong. He smiles when he sees you, walking toward you with his arms slightly outstretched like he wants to embrace you but isn't sure if it's appropriate. He looks older than you remember, or maybe you just notice his age more now, the lines around his eyes, the grey in his beard. He tells you he's on a journey to a neighbouring monastery and thought he'd stop to check on his former patients, to see how you're doing, to praise God for your recovery. Your mother invites him inside enthusiastically, offers him water and bread, makes him sit by the fire even though it's warm enough outside that the fire is barely needed. She thanks him repeatedly, calls him your saviour, says she prays for him every night. Brother Aldwin accepts her gratitude with humble nods, saying he was merely an instrument of God's will, that all healing comes from above. You sit quietly, watching this interaction, and when he finally turns to you and asks how you're feeling, you have to decide how honest to be. You could tell him the truth, that your kidneys are permanently damaged, that you'll never be fully healthy again, that you live with constant pain and limitation. You could tell him about the village healer's warning to avoid physicians and their treatments. You could tell him that the emerald he gave you almost killed you, but you don't say any of those things. You tell him you're much better, thank you, still regaining your strength but improving. It's not exactly a lie, you are better than you were in the infirmary, and the parts you're leaving out seem cruel to mention, would serve no purpose except to hurt a man who was trying to help. Brother Aldwin looks pleased, vindicated, his medical approach confirmed by your survival. He tells your mother that you should continue with herbal teas, particularly anything with sage or feverfew, and that if the fever ever returns you should come back to the monastery immediately. He doesn't mention Emerald, and you wonder if he stopped using it, if other patients died and made him reconsider, or if you were just lucky that the woman in grey intervened when she did and other patients weren't as fortunate. You want to ask about her, if she's still at the monastery, if she's well, but asking would require explaining why you care, and that conversation goes places you don't want to go. Brother Aldwin stays for perhaps an hour, drinking water and eating bread, talking with your parents about monastery life and local news and the threat of plague that seems to have passed your region by. He asks about your family, learns your siblings' names, blesses each of them with a hand on their heads and a murmured prayer. Your younger sister is delighted by the attention, keeps asking him questions about the monastery. Do they have horses? Do they have cats? What do monks eat? And he answers patiently, kindly, clearly someone who likes children. When he finally stands to leave, your mother tries to give him food for his journey, but he refuses gently, says the monastery provides for his needs. He does accept a small bundle of early spring vegetables from the garden, fresh peas and young onions, and he tucks them into his saddlebag carefully before mounting his donkey. Before he rides away, he comes over to you one last time and places his hand on your head the way he did with your siblings, and he prays for your continued health and God's protection over you. His hand is warm and steady, and you close your eyes and let him pray, and when he's done, he tells you that you were one of his most challenging cases, that he feared you wouldn't survive, that your recovery is evidence that his treatments work when combined with faith. Then he rides away, the donkey's hooves clopping on the dirt road, and your mother stands watching until he's out of sight, wiping tears from her eyes. You go back inside and sit by the dying fire, and you think about how people can be wrong about everything and still be good, can cause harm while trying to help, can believe completely in things that aren't true. Brother Aldwin will go back to his monastery and continue treating patients with bloodletting and emerald and herbal remedies that sometimes help and sometimes hurt, and sometimes do nothing at all, and he'll never know the difference because he has no way of knowing, no framework for understanding his own failures. Your father comes in from the field and asks what the monk wanted, and your mother tells him excitedly about the visit, how Brother Aldwin checked on you, how blessed they are to have such a caring physician. Your father just nods and goes to wash his hands. Summer arrives with its heat and longer days, and you settle into a routine that feels almost normal, almost like the life you might have had if you'd never gotten sick. You work in the garden every morning while it's still cool, help your mother with household tasks in the afternoon, rest in the evening when the heat is worst. Your body has found an equilibrium, functioning at its reduced capacity but functioning nonetheless, and you've learned to work within those limits. The pain in your back is constant but manageable, something you've learned to live with the way people learn to live with all sorts of chronic conditions, just part of the background of your existence. You're urinating a bit more now that it's warmer, maybe because you're drinking more water to stay hydrated in the heat, and there's less blood in it, though it still happens occasionally. Random days where you see pink in the chamber pot and have to remind yourself not to panic, that this is just how your body works now. Your family has a good harvest of early summer vegetables, peas and lettuce and radishes, and the chickens are laying well, producing eggs that your mother trades at the market for things you need, flour and salt, and occasionally a small piece of salted fish. You're eating better than you did all winter, and the improved nutrition helps, gives you more energy, makes your body feel less fragile. You've even gained back some of the weight you lost, not all of it, but enough that your clothes fit better and your face doesn't look quite so gaunt. Your mother notices and comments on it constantly, how healthy you're looking, how well you're doing, and you let her be happy about it even though you know that looking better doesn't mean being better. Your kidneys are still damaged, that hasn't changed and won't change. But you're managing, and management is a form of success. The village healer sends for you again in mid-June, and this time you go alone, confident enough now in your ability to walk that distance without assistance. She examines you with the same thorough attention as before, pressing on your abdomen and back, asking her questions, nodding at your answers. When she's done, she sits back and tells you that you're doing well, all things considered, that your body has adjusted to its limitations better than she expected. She gives you more herbs, the same dandelion and nettle mixture, and she also gives you advice that's more philosophical than medical. Live carefully, she says, but don't live in fear. Fear makes the body tight and tense, makes everything worse. Find joy where you can, rest when you need to. Listen to your body because it will tell you what it needs if you pay attention. She talks about other patients she's treated over the years, people with damaged organs or chronic pain or permanent injuries from accidents, and how the ones who survived longest were the ones who found ways to be content despite their limitations. You ask her how old she is and she laughs, a dry sound like leaves rustling, and says she's lost count but probably around 75, which is ancient by medieval standards. Most people don't live past 50 or 60, especially not peasants who work physically demanding lives. She's survived this long, she tells you, by being careful and paying attention and not trusting most medical advice. She learned her healing craft from her mother, who learned it from her mother, knowledge passed down through generations of women who watched and observed and figured out what actually helped versus what just seemed like it should help. She's delivered babies, treated wounds, helped people die comfortably when there was no hope of recovery. She's seen plague twice in her lifetime, watched it kill most of the village, survived by isolating herself in this cottage and not letting anyone in until the dying stopped. She tells you all this while preparing a tonic for someone else, grinding herbs with steady hands that don't shake as much when she's working. When you leave her cottage, you feel oddly comforted, not because she promised you'd be fine, but because she acknowledged that you might not be and that's okay, that survival isn't always about living longest, but about living well with whatever time you have. The walk home takes longer than it should because you stop frequently to rest, sitting on fallen logs or large stones by the roadside, watching the summer landscape around you. Fields full of growing grain, wildflowers in the ditches, blue and yellow and purple. A pair of birds building a nest in a tree, flying back and forth with twigs and grass. The world continuing its cycles regardless of human suffering or joy. By midsummer, you've developed a friendship of sorts with the blacksmith's daughter, a girl about your age named Agnes who has her own health problems, a twisted foot from birth that makes her walk with a pronounced limp. She can't do heavy work either, can't spend all day standing at a loom or hauling water, so she's learned other skills, skilled with her hands at delicate work, embroidery and fine sewing that wealthy families occasionally commission. She seeks you out one day while you're sitting in your family's garden, working your way through a pile of mending, and she sits down next to you without asking permission, picks up a shirt that needs a torn seam repaired, and just starts working. You sit in companionable silence for a while, needles moving in and out of fabric, and then she says quietly that she heard about your kidney damage, about how you almost died at the monastery, and she wanted you to know that she understands what it's like to have a body that doesn't work right. She tells you about her foot, how it's been twisted since birth, how the midwife tried to straighten it when she was a baby by binding it tightly, breaking bones and resetting them, a treatment that was supposed to help but just caused infection and made everything worse. Her foot is more damaged now than it would have been if they'd just left it alone, but nobody knew that at the time. Everyone believed the midwife who said this was the proper treatment. She's lived her whole life with pain and limitation, and the knowledge that medical intervention made her worse, and there's something relieving about talking to someone who understands that specific betrayal, the way the people who were supposed to help you ended up hurting you instead. You tell her about the emerald, about drinking powdered gemstone mixed with wine, about your kidneys failing while Brother Aldwin stood there convinced he was saving your life. She listens without interrupting, and when you're done she just nods and says that healers are dangerous, that sometimes the best medicine is being left alone to let your body figure things out. Agnes becomes a regular presence in your life after that, coming by several times a week to sit and sew and talk. She tells you about the village from her perspective, the gossip and the grudges and the small dramas that make up daily life. She tells you which families are struggling, who's expecting a baby, who's fighting with their neighbors over a property boundary. She tells you about her own family, her father who works too hard and drinks too much, her mother who's tired all the time from managing the household and the smithy business, her younger brothers who are learning the trade and burning themselves regularly on hot metal. She's funny in a dry, sarcastic way, making observations about people that are cutting but not quite cruel, and you find yourself laughing more than you have in months. Laughter hurts a little, pulls at muscles that haven't been used much, but it's a good hurt, the kind that reminds you you're alive. One afternoon in late July, Agnes brings embroidery thread in colours you've never seen before, deep blues and bright reds and a green that's almost emerald, though you try not to think about that association. She's been commissioned to embroider a piece of linen for a wealthy merchant's wife, a decorative cloth that will hang on a wall, and she lets you help even though your stitching is nowhere near as fine as hers. You work side by side, creating patterns of flowers and vines, and she tells you about the merchant's wife, a woman who's visited the blacksmith shop several times, always dressed in elaborate clothes that seem impractical for village life. The woman is kind enough, Agnes says, but there's a loneliness to her, being wealthy in a place where wealth sets you apart, having fine things but nobody to really share them with. You think about how suffering and isolation come in different forms, how the merchant's wife with her fine clothes might be just as trapped as you are with your damaged kidneys, just in a different kind of cage. The embroidery project takes weeks, and during that time you and Agnes develop the kind of friendship that's based on shared understanding rather than shared experiences. You're different people from different families with different struggles, but you both know what it's like to be limited, to be judged, to be treated as lesser because your bodies don't work the way bodies are supposed to. She tells you about boys who won't court her because of her foot, families who won't consider her for marriage because they assume she can't manage a household or bear healthy children. You tell her about feeling like a burden to your family, about the guilt that comes with needing extra care, extra attention, extra resources. She says something that surprises you, that maybe being a burden is just part of being human, that everyone needs help sometimes, that the whole concept of burden is flawed because it assumes people should be independent and self-sufficient when actually humans survive by depending on each other. The idea sits with you for days afterward, turning over in your mind, challenging assumptions you didn't realize you had about worth and usefulness and what it means to deserve care. August brings the main harvest, and even though you can't do the heavy work, you find ways to contribute. You help with the gleaning, walking through the fields after the grain has been cut to pick up any stalks that were dropped or missed, gathering them into bundles that add up to a surprising amount over days of careful work. It's slow and your back aches from bending over repeatedly, but it's something you can do at your own pace, resting when you need to, and the contribution matters to your family's winter stores. Your younger siblings work alongside you, making a game of who can find the most dropped grain, and their energy and enthusiasm make the work feel less tedious. Your sister finds a mouse nest in one of the sheaves, tiny pink babies that haven't opened their eyes yet, and she wants to keep them as pets, but your mother gently explains that they need their mother, that they should be left alone. Your sister pouts but agrees, and you all watch as the mother mouse cautiously returns to gather her babies, moving them one by one to a safer location. The harvest celebration happens in late August, a village-wide gathering on the field next to the church where everyone brings food to share, and there's music and dancing. Your family contributes a basket of early apples and some of the vegetables from your garden, and your mother has made a small cake sweetened with honey, a luxury that she's been saving honey for all summer. The celebration is loud and crowded and overwhelming in a good way, everyone in the village together, temporarily setting aside their individual struggles to mark the successful harvest. There's a musician with a lute who plays dancing tunes, and people dance in the informal, energetic way of peasants who've been working all day and are now determined to enjoy themselves. You don't dance, don't have the energy or the body for it, but you watch and clap along with the music, and Agnes sits next to you making sarcastic commentary about people's dancing technique that makes you laugh until your sides hurt. Your younger brother brings you a cup of ale, weak and slightly sour but cold from being stored in someone's cellar, and you sip it slowly while watching your family. Your father is talking with other men about next year's planting, always planning ahead, always thinking about survival. Your mother is with a group of women, sharing news and advice, and probably discussing someone's pregnancy or illness or domestic crisis. Your siblings are running wild with the other village children, playing games that seem to involve a lot of shrieking and falling down. Everyone looks tired but happy, or at least content, the satisfaction of having completed hard work and knowing there will be food for winter. These moments are what makes the struggle worthwhile, you think, these brief celebrations between endless periods of labor and worry. As the sun sets and the celebration continues, someone lights a bonfire in the center of the field, and people gather around it as the evening cools. The fire is huge, flames reaching high into the darkening sky, and the heat of it pushes back the night chill. An old man starts telling stories, traditional tales that everyone's heard before but still enjoys, stories about saints and demons and ordinary people who encountered magic. He tells one about a girl who was cursed with an illness that no physician could cure, and she was finally healed by drinking water from a holy well, and everyone nods along because that's how these stories go, miraculous cures and divine intervention. You wonder what the real version of that story was, if there was a real girl, if she actually recovered or if she died and the story just got rewritten to have a happy ending. Medieval stories are full of miraculous cures, probably because real medicine was so ineffective that miracles seemed like the only reasonable explanation for anyone surviving serious illness. Agnes nudges you and whispers that the story is nonsense, that holy wells are just regular wells that someone declared holy to attract pilgrims and their money. You agree but quietly, not wanting to challenge the storyteller or the listeners who clearly find comfort in these tales. Later, as the bonfire burns down and families start heading home, you walk back with your family under a sky full of stars, more stars than you've ever seen because there's no light pollution in medieval nights, just pure darkness punctuated by countless points of light. Your father carries your youngest sister who fell asleep during the celebration, and your mother walks with her arm around your shoulders, supporting you even though you didn't ask for help, and you lean into her slightly, accepting the support, letting yourself be cared for without guilt for maybe the first time since you got sick. September arrives with cooler temperatures and the beginning of autumn, and with it comes a realization that you've now been living with your damaged kidneys for almost a year, a full cycle of seasons. You've survived winter, made it through spring, worked through summer, and now you're approaching another harvest season, another preparation for cold months ahead. The anniversary feels significant somehow, a marker that you've managed to build a life within your limitations, that survival is possible even when your body doesn't work right. You're not the same person you were before you got sick, that version of yourself is gone completely, but you're not sure you'd want to go back even if you could. There's something about surviving something terrible that changes how you see everything else, makes ordinary moments feel more precious, makes you less willing to waste time on things that don't matter. Agnes mentions one day that there's a travelling fair coming to a larger town about half a day's journey away, and she asks if you want to go with her and her family. You're hesitant because half a day's journey is more walking than you've done in months, and there's the question of whether your body can handle it, but she's so enthusiastic about it, talking about the merchants and performers and things you can see that never come to your small village, that you find yourself agreeing. Your mother is worried, thinks it's too much, that you'll exhaust yourself and make your condition worse, but your father surprisingly takes your side, says you should go, that you're young and you should see things beyond the village while you can. There's something ominous in that last phrase, while you can, an acknowledgement that your life might be shorter than it should be, but it's also permission. Recognition that living carefully doesn't mean not living at all. The journey to the fair takes most of the morning, riding in the blacksmith's cart with Agnes and her family, the cart loaded with tools and horseshoes and other metalwork that her father plans to sell. You sit in the back with Agnes, surrounded by iron goods, and the cart jolts over every rut in the road, making your back ache and your kidneys throb, but the excitement of going somewhere new makes it bearable. Agnes is talking constantly, pointing out landmarks along the road, telling you stories about previous fairs she's attended, describing the things you might see. Her enthusiasm is contagious, and you find yourself getting excited despite the physical discomfort, despite the tiredness that's already settling into your bones. The fair is bigger than anything you've ever experienced, spread across a large field outside the town, with tents and stalls and crowds of people from villages all around the region. There are merchants selling cloth and pottery and tools, performers doing acrobatics and juggling, food vendors selling meat pies and honey cakes and roasted nuts. The noise is overwhelming, everyone shouting and haggling and laughing, and the smells are intense, cooking food and animal dung and unwashed bodies and something sweet you can't identify. Agnes grabs your hand so you don't get separated in the crowd, and you wander through the fair together, looking at everything, touching fabrics you could never afford, watching a man swallow fire which seems impossible but you see it with your own eyes. There's a tent where a barber surgeon is set up, advertising bloodletting and tooth extraction and treatment for various ailments, and you and Agnes stop to watch from a safe distance. A man is having a tooth pulled, the barber surgeon using a tool that looks like pliers, and the man's screaming is audible even over the fair noise. No anesthetic, just brute force and speed, and when the tooth finally comes out, the man spits blood into a bowl and staggers away looking pale and shaky. The barber surgeon holds up the tooth triumphantly like it's a trophy, and people in the crowd nod approvingly like this is good medicine. You and Agnes exchange looks, both thinking the same thing, that medieval medicine is barbaric and dangerous, and you're both lucky to be alive despite it rather than because of it. At another stall, there's a woman selling what she claims are holy relics, pieces of saints' bones and fragments of the true cross and vials of water from sacred springs. Agnes whispers that it's all fake, that the bones are probably from animals and the wood is from some random tree and the water is from a regular well, but people are buying them anyway, handing over coins for these bits of fraud because they believe it will protect them or heal them or bring them luck. You watch a woman buy a vial of water for her sick child, watch her cradle it carefully like it's the most precious thing she owns, and you feel sad for her because she's desperate and being exploited, but also you understand because desperation makes people believe in anything that offers hope. You and Agnes buy honey cakes with coins her mother gave her, and you sit on the ground eating them slowly, savouring the sweetness, watching the crowd move around you. Your back is aching badly now, the walking and standing and general activity too much for your damaged body, but you don't want to leave yet, don't want to miss any of this rare experience. By afternoon, you're exhausted in a way that's beyond normal tiredness, your body using up resources it doesn't have, but you push through because Agnes has found a puppet show, and she's pulling you toward it with the excitement of someone who rarely gets to see entertainment. The puppets are crude wooden figures operated by a man hidden behind a cloth screen, and they're performing a story about knights and dragons that's probably meant for children, but Agnes is delighted anyway. You watch the jerky movements of the puppets, listen to the man doing different voices, and you think about how humans create stories and entertainment even in the hardest circumstances, how the need for narrative and joy persists regardless of suffering. The puppet knight defeats the puppet dragon, and the small crowd that's gathered claps and tosses a few coins into a hat, and the puppeteer bows and starts setting up for the next show. You tell Agnes you need to rest, and she immediately looks concerned, asks if you're okay, if you need to go back to the cart. You assure her you're fine, just tired, and she finds a spot at the edge of the fair where there's a low stone wall you can sit on, away from the worst of the crowd. She sits with you even though you tell her she should keep exploring. She's missing the fair, but she says she'd rather sit with you, that the fair will be here for hours and your friendship is more important. It's a small thing, but it makes your throat tight with emotion, this casual declaration that you matter more than entertainment, that your company is valuable even when you can't keep up. While you're sitting there resting, an old woman stops in front of you, looks at you with sharp assessing eyes, and asks what's wrong with you. It's a rude question, but you're too tired to be offended, so you tell her kidney damage, and she nods like she expected that answer. She says she can see it in your face, in the slight yellow tint to your skin, the puffiness around your eyes, signs that your body is struggling to filter toxins properly. She tells you she's a healer, has been treating kidney troubles for 40 years, and she has a remedy that could help you. She reaches into a bag she's carrying and pulls out a small bottle of dark liquid, says it's made from crushed beetles and certain herbs, very effective, only costs 2 silver pennies, which is probably more than your family makes in a month. Agnes immediately tells the woman to go away, that you're not interested, and the woman gets huffy, says she's only trying to help, that you'll regret not taking her cure when your kidneys fail completely. Agnes stands up, even though she's smaller than the woman, and tells her more firmly to leave, and eventually the woman does, muttering about ungrateful patients. After she's gone, Agnes sits back down and says that woman was a fraud, that crushed beetles probably do nothing for kidneys and might actually make things worse, that the fair is full of people like that, con artists selling fake cures to desperate people. You tell Agnes you knew she was a fraud, you weren't going to buy anything, and Agnes says she knows, but she still felt protective, still wanted to make sure the woman didn't pressure you into something harmful. It occurs to you that this is what real care looks like, not grand gestures or expensive treatments, just someone paying attention, someone stepping in when you need them, someone sitting with you when you're tired instead of rushing ahead without you. The blacksmith finds you both eventually, says it's time to head home before it gets dark, and you're relieved because your body has nothing left to give. The journey back is harder than the journey there, every jolt of the cart sending pain through your back, your kidneys throbbing, your whole body aching with the kind of exhaustion that comes from pushing way past your limits. But you don't regret going. You saw things you'll remember for the rest of your life, however long that is. You experienced something beyond your small village and your daily routines. You had a day that felt full and rich and worth the pain it's costing you. When you get home, your mother takes one look at you and puts you straight to bed, brings you water and a bowl of soup, feels your forehead for fever. She's not angry that you went, but she's worried, can see that the trip took a toll, and she sits with you while you eat, not saying much, just being present. Your father comes in later, asks if you had a good time, and you tell him yes, thank you for letting me go, and he nods, satisfied. That night you sleep deeply despite the pain, your dreams full of puppet shows and fire swallowers and crowds of people moving through sunlit fields. Well, the aftermath of the fair trip lasts for days, your body exhausted and struggling more than usual, and for a while you worry that maybe you pushed too hard, that the damage you did might be permanent on top of the permanent damage you already have. Your urine gets darker, scantier, and there's blood in it again, more than you've seen in months. Your back pain intensifies to the point where even lying down doesn't help, and you spend several nights barely sleeping, just lying there in the dark waiting for morning. Your mother makes you stay in bed, brings you the healer's dandelion tea 3 times a day, watches you with the kind of worried attention that makes you feel guilty for going to the fair in the first place. But slowly, over the course of a week, your body stabilizes again, finds its baseline, and the crisis passes. You're reminded viscerally that your new normal is fragile, that you have to be careful in ways that other people your age don't, that pushing your limits has consequences that aren't worth whatever temporary joy you gained. Agnes comes to visit during your recovery, brings the finished embroidery project to show you, the cloth covered in intricate flowers and vines in those brilliant colours, beautiful enough that it almost hurts to look at. She's proud of the work, and rightfully so, but she's also apologetic, feels responsible for you getting sick again because she's the one who suggested the fair trip. You tell her it's not her fault, that you made your own choice, that you don't regret it despite the consequences, but she still feels bad in that way friends do when they care about you. She sits with you while you're bedridden, reads to you from a prayer book she borrowed from the church, though her reading is slow and halting because she's not fully literate, learned just enough to read religious texts but not much else. The sound of her voice is comforting even when she stumbles over words, and you drift in and out of sleep while she reads about saints and their sufferings, which from your current perspective seem both dramatic and relatable. By mid-September you're back on your feet, weaker than you were before the fair but functional, and you return to your usual routines with a new appreciation for their manageability. The garden work, the mending, the simple daily tasks that don't push you beyond your capacity. Your family is harvesting the last of the summer vegetables, tomatoes and beans and squash, and you help with the preserving, cutting vegetables to dry, packing others in salt, making the food last as long as possible into the coming winter. Your mother has developed an efficient system over years of practice, and you work beside her in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that comes from familiarity and shared purpose. Your younger sister helps too, though mostly she makes messes and asks endless questions, but she's learning, absorbing the knowledge that will let her run her own household someday. The village healer sends word again, asking you to visit, and this time when you go she has someone with her, a younger woman, maybe 30, who she introduces as her niece. The niece is learning the healing craft, being taught the same way the healer was taught by her mother, knowledge passing down through generations of women who pay attention and remember. The healer examines you with the niece watching, and she uses your case as a teaching opportunity, explaining what she's looking for, what the signs mean, how to recognize kidney damage versus other ailments. She presses on your back and asks if it hurts here, and you answer honestly, yes, less there, and the niece takes mental notes, her face serious with concentration. The healer tells her niece that you're a good example of someone who survived bad medical treatment, that most patients with this much kidney damage would be dead by now, but you're managing through careful living and luck, and probably some inherent resilience in your constitution. The healer tells you something new this time, that she thinks you might have another 10 or 15 years if you continue being careful, which is longer than she initially expected. 10 or 15 years feels like both a lot and a little, enough time to have a life but not enough time to grow old, and you sit with that information trying to figure out how you feel about it. The healer's niece asks questions about your treatment at the monastery, and you tell her about the emerald, about the bloodletting, about how the emerald specifically is what damaged your kidneys. The niece looks shocked, asks if the monk knew that emerald was toxic, and you explain that no, he had no idea, that he believed completely that he was helping. The healer uses this as a teaching moment about the danger of following tradition without observation, about how just because something was written in old texts doesn't mean it's true, about how real healing knowledge comes from watching what actually helps versus what actually harms. Before you leave, the healer gives you a new preparation, something different from the dandelion tea, made with herbs she says will support what kidney function you have left. She doesn't promise it will make you better, just that it might slow down further deterioration. You take it gratefully, this gift from someone who actually seems to understand what's wrong with you, and doesn't claim to have miracle cures. October brings preparations for winter, the same cycle you went through last year, but now with the experience of knowing you can survive it. Your family works to finish the harvest, gather firewood, repair anything on the house that needs fixing before cold weather makes outdoor work miserable. You're able to contribute more this year than last, your body having adjusted somewhat to its limitations, knowing better how to pace yourself, when to rest, when to push through. Your father is building up the firewood pile higher than usual, conscious of how much you needed last winter, determined to have enough this time. Your mother is preserving everything she can, drying herbs, salting meat from a pig your family slaughtered and shared with neighbors, storing root vegetables in the cellar. The work is endless, but it's purposeful, everyone understanding that survival depends on preparation. Agnes has become such a regular part of your life that your family treats her almost like another daughter, always setting an extra place when she comes by at mealtimes, including her in family decisions, asking her opinion on things. She's been teaching you embroidery properly, the fine detailed work that she's so good at, and your stitches are improving slowly, never going to match her skill but good enough that you can help with simpler projects. She's been commissioned to make a set of linens for a wedding, and we work together on the hem decoration, repeating patterns of flowers and leaves, your needles moving in comfortable rhythm. She tells you about the couple getting married, both from families in a neighboring village, and how the bride's mother is very particular about what she wants, keeps changing her mind about designs, making Agnes rework sections multiple times. You listen and sympathize and offer to help however you can, and Agnes says just having company while she works makes it easier, makes the tedious parts less tedious. One afternoon while you're working on the wedding linens, Agnes asks if you've thought about marriage yourself, if you want that eventually. The question surprises you because you haven't thought about it much, assumed that your damaged health makes you an unlikely candidate for marriage, that no family would want to take on someone who needs extra care and might die young. But Agnes points out that plenty of people marry for reasons other than perfect health, that companionship and partnership matter more than physical capability, that someone might value you for who you are rather than what you can do. She says it casually, like it's obvious, but the idea settles into your mind and stays there. Maybe marriage is possible, maybe a future beyond just surviving is possible, maybe you're allowed to want things even though your body is damaged. Your younger brother asks you to help him with a project, building a small cart for hauling firewood, and you sit with him in the yard working on it together. He's at that age where he's trying to figure out how to be useful, how to contribute to the family in meaningful ways, and the cart is his idea, his attempt to make the firewood gathering more efficient. You help him measure and cut wood, fit pieces together, and he chatters while you work about things he's noticed, observations about how other families do things, ideas he has for improvements. He's smart in a practical way, good at solving problems, and you realize he's going to be fine, that he'll grow up capable and competent, that your family will be okay even after you're gone. It's a strange comfort, knowing that your death won't destroy the people you love, that life will continue without you the way it continues after everyone dies. As October progresses toward November, the temperature drops and the leaves turn colours, brilliant reds and golds that make the landscape look like it's on fire. Your family takes a day to go foraging in the forest, gathering nuts and mushrooms and late berries, and you go with them even though the walk is long and tiring. The forest floor is covered in fallen leaves that crunch under your feet, and the air smells like earth and decay and growing things all mixed together. Your siblings scatter to search for nuts, competing to see who can fill their basket first, and you work slowly, methodically, picking up walnuts and chestnuts, your back aching but your mind at peace. There's something meditative about this kind of work, the repetitive searching and gathering, the quiet of the forest interrupted only by bird calls and wind in the remaining leaves. Your father finds a particularly good spot for mushrooms, and he calls everyone over to help gather them, showing the younger children which ones are safe to eat and which ones are poisonous. The knowledge is passed down this way, practical information that keeps people alive, learned not from books but from experience and careful observation. You wake on the first morning of November to a cold so sharp it feels like it has teeth, nipping at your fingers even before you push aside the blanket. The fire in the hearth has burned down to embers dim and sullen, and you shuffle over to coax it back to life the way your mother showed you last winter slow. Breaths patient coaxing, the kind of gentleness usually reserved for babies and sick animals. Outside, frost rims the edges of the window like someone traced it with a silver needle. Winter announces itself long before it actually arrives, sending out little warnings, little reminders of who's in charge. You know this season now, its tricks and cruelty, its strange quiet beauty. Last year you entered it terrified. This year you walk into it with caution, but not panic. You've learned how to move through cold days without letting them devour you. You pace your chores. You sit when your chest tightens. You know the exact thickness of wool you need to keep your breath from rattling. The knowledge doesn't feel heroic. It feels ordinary, like any skill people gain when survival demands it. Your mother starts simmering a pot of broth most days, partly to keep the kitchen warm, partly because she can coax you into eating more when it's hot and savoury and smells like comfort. She doesn't say it aloud, but she watches you closely in the colder months, the way farmers watch a weak lamb in early spring, hopeful, cautious, unwilling to tempt fate by making assumptions. Agnes comes by more often, wrapped in 3 shawls and complaining dramatically about the cold, which is her way of making you laugh. She brings embroidery to share, though she usually forgets it halfway through the visit, because she gets caught up telling you about the wedding she's stitching for. Apparently the bride's mother has changed her mind again, this time about the tablecloth borders, and Agnes is equal parts annoyed and amused. She vents about it with the same passion your father reserves for discussing taxes. Sometimes she brings small gifts, a bit of dried mint for your chest, a scrap of blue thread she thought you'd like, a story she overheard in the village that she knows will entertain you. She talks more than she used to, and you listen more than you used to, and something easy settles between you, like a shared blanket on a cold day. One afternoon, while snow flurries swirl like drifting feathers outside, she asks what kind of future you picture for yourself. Not the vague someday future, but concrete things. A home of your own? A small garden? A trade? Companionship? Her questions land softly but deeply, like stones dropped into still water. You realise you've spent so long thinking about surviving each season that you haven't allowed yourself to imagine anything beyond the next thaw. You think about the cart you helped your younger brother build, about how proud he was when it actually worked. You think about the look on your mother's face when you stitched an entire row without needing her to redo any of it. You think about how your father now trusts you to help sort firewood because he knows you won't push yourself to collapse. You think about Agnes, her laugh, her warmth, the constancy of her presence. Maybe a future isn't something other people get. Maybe it's something you build in tiny increments, like adding a single log to a fire each morning until it's big enough to heat a home. Your father brings in a pail of water that evening and mentions that the healer in the next village gave someone a winter tonic made of boiled onions, mustard seeds, and a frankly alarming amount of vinegar. Swears it keeps the fever away, he says. You resist the urge to laugh, because medieval cures have never met a bodily ailment they didn't think could be chased off by a vegetable and a prayer. Still, you're grateful that your family no longer forces such concoctions on you. They've learned that care isn't loud or aggressive, it's quiet, steady, consistent. A warm room, a paced workload, a hand on your back when coughing steals your breath. November moves slowly, days shrinking into early twilight. You spend more evenings with Agnes, sharing quiet tasks by firelight. Sometimes you talk, sometimes you don't. Both feel comfortable. One evening, as she gathers her things to leave, she pauses at the doorway and says, almost shyly, "There are all kinds of marriages in this world. Some start with expectation, some start with convenience, some start with choosing to simply keep showing up." Her eyes meet yours, warm, steady. And then she's gone, leaving behind the faint smell of cold air and wool, and a thought you can't quite shake. Maybe you're not as alone in this world as you once believed. December arrives like an exhale you didn't want to release, bringing more snow in one night than the entire previous winter. It falls in thick, lazy flakes, soft enough to look peaceful but heavy enough to make the roof groan in places. Your family works together to clear paths around the house, your father shoveling, your siblings scraping, you brushing away powder where you can without straining yourself. Everyone moves with a kind of communal determination, as if winter is an adversary you've collectively agreed not to let win. The days are short now, light slips away early, as if it has better places to be. You spend most hours indoors, tending small tasks, mending torn sleeves, sorting dried herbs, helping your mother organize the pantry. The rhythm is comforting, like a lullaby made of chores and warmth and repetition. Agnes visits nearly every other day. She claims it's because her house is too drafty, and your hearth is better. But she also brings her embroidery basket every time, even when she ends up talking more than stitching. There's a gentleness to her presence lately, a quieter than usual softness, as if winter has pressed the volume down on both of you. One evening she arrives with a basket of winter apples and a grin that tells you she's hiding some piece of gossip. She makes you guess 3 times before telling you the wedding she's been sewing for has been postponed because the groom slipped on ice and fractured his ankle. She's sympathetic, of course, but also delightfully relieved to have more time to finish the linens without being harassed by the bride's mother. She tells the story with her hands, waving her needle around dangerously, until you insist she put it down. You're laughing more these days, a soft kind of laughter, the kind that doesn't hurt your ribs, the kind that feels like it's made of light. But winter still tests you. Your chest tightens occasionally, you move slowly on cold mornings, there are moments you forget to breathe deeply enough and have to sit, steady yourself, wait for your pulse to calm. Yet none of it frightens you the way it used to. Fear loses its sharp edges when you've lived with something long enough. It becomes familiarity instead, still unwelcome, still inconvenient, but manageable. Your family notices the shifts in you. Your mother brings out a thicker blanket for your bed, smiling the whole time as if it's a secret between the two of you. Your father tells you, awkwardly, because feelings are not his talents, that he's proud of how you handle the hard days. Your siblings hover less, trusting you to know your limits. One night, near the end of December, Agnes stays later than usual. Snow is falling again, heavy and silent, and the candles burn low. Your family has already gone to sleep, the air warm with the lingering scent of stew and wood smoke. You and Agnes work side by side at the table, hemming a piece of linen for no particular reason other than the pleasure of doing something together. Her stitches are perfect. Yours are improving. The fire crackles. The whole world feels held in a quiet, warm breath. She pauses, sets down her needle, and says softly, like someone speaking into the dark, "You know, I meant what I said about marriage coming in many forms." You look at her. She looks at you. There's no grand confession, no dramatic pause, no trembling hands, just 2 people sitting in the soft half-light of winter, realizing that maybe, just maybe, something steady and warm has been growing here for a long time. She doesn't ask a question, you don't answer one. It's not the kind of moment that needs words. Instead, she takes your hand, gently, the way she handles delicate fabric, and you let her because it feels natural, like something that's been waiting for its own season. Outside, snow continues to fall, covering everything in clean white quiet, Inside, your future shifts almost imperceptibly, but enough that you feel it, like a new stitch pulling a pattern together. You don't know how long your life will be, you don't know how harsh this winter or the next might become, but you know this, you are cared for, you are not alone, and for the first time, the idea of a future doesn't feel like a distant luxury reserved for other people. It feels like something that might actually belong to you. And now the story softens, as all long stories eventually do, letting its threads loosen and settle the way snow settles across quiet fields. You rest there, in the low glow of the fire, feeling its warmth drift across your hands, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of a home that holds you, protects you, and asks nothing more from you than your presence. The world outside is dim, wrapped in winter's hush, but inside everything slows to a gentle, drifting calm. Each sound grows rounder, softer. The crackle of a settling log, the whisper of fabric as someone shifts in their chair, the faint sigh of wind nudging the corners of the house. You take a long breath, the kind that expands gently through your chest without effort, and you let it fall again, warm and low. The room feels like a cocoon, and you are held inside it, unhurried, untroubled, floating on the quiet certainty that even in harsh seasons, softness is possible. Even in difficult years, moments of peace still arrive. The stories of medieval cures and strange survival tricks drift far from your thoughts now, fading like distant echoes. What remains is the steady sense of being here, in a small warm place, safe for tonight. You let your body feel heavier, as if sinking into a bed of fresh snow that's warm instead of cold, comforting instead of biting. You let your mind loosen its grip on anything sharp or anxious, letting thoughts pass like slow-moving clouds. And as the fire dims to a tender glow, you imagine the world settling with you. Snow falling slowly, breath deepening, heart easing. Everything soft, everything quiet, everything ready for rest. Whenever you're ready, you can drift with it.